A black-haired young man sat with his head lowered and admitted that he had been kicked out of the house. Sitting across from a long-haired person smoking, he explained that his mom had told him to leave because he did not have a job, and when the smoker asked if that meant he was homeless, he quietly confirmed it. The smoker added that they could not really blame her and guessed this was what happened when someone was 30 and still unemployed. Looking drained, he sighed that he did not have the money to live on his own and confessed that he did not know what to do. The smoker got his attention by calling him Kyosuke, and when Kyosuke looked up in puzzlement, they held the cigarette near their lips and prepared to speak. With a calm expression, the long-haired person suddenly asked Kyosuke to marry them. Kyosuke shot up so fast that the table slammed loudly, and he blurted out in shock, asking what they had just said and whether they meant him. Without changing expression, the smoker clarified that they meant marriage with divorce in mind, leaving Kyosuke completely stunned. Kyosuke protested that this was still a proposal even if it was not a real one, while the smoker coolly said they were not actually a fan of marriage and added that he had almost made their heart flutter. The long-haired person explained that their parents were rich and prideful, and that they had been nagging them to get married ever since they turned 30. Laying out the plan, they said that if they got married, they could shut their parents up and then get a divorce later, so the parents would be disappointed and leave them alone, while Kyosuke could only stare back and react as if it were an outrageous power play. Rui said he was worried about why Kyosuke would want something as intimate as marriage with someone like him, especially when they would divorce right after. Flustered and blushing, Kyosuke argued that they were talking about marriage, so Rui was supposed to marry a soulmate, saying a person never knew when their soulmate might suddenly appear, and that Rui should marry someone who would make him happy. Rui flatly asked if Kyosuke was still dreaming about soulmates, and when Kyosuke insisted that of course he wanted to marry his soulmate, Rui shot back that this was exactly why he did not have a girlfriend at his age, which hit him hard. Smoking with a detached look, Rui said he did not care about soulmates, did not want to become a burden in someone else's life, and that was why he did not want marriage. He only wanted the title of being married to get his parents off his back. As Rui stubbed the cigarette out with a soft crush, he added that, besides, the deal did sound bad for Kyosuke. Resting his cheek in one hand, Rui said Kyosuke could live with him since he did not have a home, and in the meantime he could look for a job or a place to stay. From across the table, Kyosuke admitted that was true, then asked how long they would be married, while Rui paused to think. Rui answered, 100 days, and when Kyosuke reacted that it was that short, he said that if it were any longer than that, he did not think he could stand living with Rui. In the background, Kyosuke looked taken aback and asked why Rui would even pick him. Looking worn out but thoughtful, Kyosuke reasoned that if they found someone they loved, they could just get divorced then, so there would be no risk, and he figured the arrangement might benefit both of them. Rui began seriously, calling him by name and saying that Kyosuke was the only one he could ask. Hui looked straight at him and asked if he would marry him, with divorce already in mind. Sweating and visibly stunned, Kyosuke hesitantly agreed, and he recalled that he had first met Rui in their first year of high school. He remembered that they started talking only because they happened to sit next to each other, and that Rui had been his only friend. Their long friendship continued after graduation, and even when they went to different universities, they still made time to see each other. Kyosuke reflected that he had always thought of Rui as someone very close to him, but calling it romantic feelings did not feel right, even if it might be presumptuous to say Rui would ever go out with a loser like him. Despite that, the thought remained. And just like that, the two of them were now married, standing side by side in wedding clothes, while Kyosuke looked completely overwhelmed. As they posed, Rui calmly said they should go home, while Kyosuke, blushing and spiraling, wondered if Rui actually liked him, reminded himself that Rui had said he was the only one he could ask, and panicked that he had really gone through with the marriage. Leaning in for the photo, Kyosuke nervously asked them to wait because his eyes were closed, while Rui said this should be enough to shut his parents up. Once the picture was taken, Rui said they should change and get out of there, but Kyosuke protested in disbelief that this was basically a wedding ceremony. In the end, the moment was reduced to a photo on a phone screen showing the two of them together in their wedding outfits. Sitting at the table with his face red and his hand over his mouth, Kyosuke stared at the paperwork in disbelief and thought that he was married to Rui now, that he really had gotten married, while Rui, standing nearby, casually remarked that he had looked beautiful in that dress too and said they had not made it official yet, so he should fill this out. Startled, Kyosuke blurted out that it was a marriage application, and when Rui said he would turn it in sometime tomorrow, Kyosuke could only react in shock that it was happening already. Holding the paper with trembling hands, Kyosuke stared at it in a panic and repeated to himself that this was a marriage application, then fixated on the fact that once they submitted it, their surnames would be the same, stumbling over the thought again and again. As Kyosuke looked on, Rui slid another document across the table and told him there was this one too. Seeing the next form, Kyosuke asked if it was a divorce application, and Rui matter-of-factly said it made sense to get them both done at once, which left Kyosuke only able to answer weakly that he was right. With an unsteady smile, Kyosuke wondered what he was even supposed to do now, and could hardly believe he was filling out marriage and divorce paperwork at the same time. Rui calmly explained that he was thinking of getting a part-time job first, then a full-time job, and finding his own place, and until then Kyosuke would need to deal with him being there, adding that Kyosuke did not have to worry because they were husband and wife now, while Kyosuke quietly accepted it, his heart pounding. A little later, Rui noticed the time and said he had not realized how late it was, then asked Kyosuke if he was hungry, making Kyosuke look up at him in surprise. Flushed and sweating, Kyosuke's thoughts spun out of control as he told himself that they really had gotten married, so there should be no problem with this, that they were husband and wife now, and then panicked all over again at the idea that Rui was about to make something homemade for him, while he forced out a shaky yes. Still blushing, Kyosuke realized he had been so caught up dwelling on the divorce that he had forgotten Rui was now his husband, and he was Rui's wife. With his heart racing, Kyosuke watched Rui from behind in the kitchen, and excitedly wondered what his new wife was making for him, then immediately grew uneasy as he questioned whether Rui was even a good cook. A tray suddenly landed with a loud thud, revealing not a homemade meal but a carefully arranged set of supplements, including pills, bars, and a small cup. Staring at it in disbelief, Kyosuke asked if Rui actually ate like this, and when Rui calmly confirmed it and said they were just supplements because he was simply getting the calories he needed, Kyosuke protested that he should at least cook something or buy normal food. Munching on one of the pieces without concern, Rui replied that eating was already a pain and spending time cooking was a waste, adding that buying food like this meant it lasted a long time on the shelf and could be eaten quickly, which left Kyosuke thinking that Rui really cared very little. Hui then matter-of-factly said that if the food was not enough, he could always buy more from a convenience store, but since he needed to get up early tomorrow, he was going to bed, and when Kyosuke asked in surprise if he was already done, Hui added that there was a guest futon available and Kyosuke could just extend the sofa and sleep there. Before leaving, Rui simply told him goodnight. Flustered, Kyosuke awkwardly returned the goodnight, and as he watched Rui go, he could only think to himself with a dazed smile that this was marriage. The next morning, Kyosuke was still lying down when Rui called his name and told him that breakfast was ready. Startled upright, Kyosuke hurriedly apologized, but Rui, setting down another tray, remarked that Kyosuke had always been a late riser, thanked him for making breakfast, and then told him to eat up. Looking at another supplement-based meal, Kyosuke could only wonder in despair whether he was supposed to eat like this for the rest of his life, while Rui explained that he had heard it was better to have a larger meal at breakfast instead of dinner, leaving Kyosuke to answer weakly that that was encouraging, he guessed. Rui glanced at his phone and said he would be late because he needed to go, and as he headed out, could only stammer for him to hold on a second while Rui casually said he was off. Flustered, but trying to be helpful, Kyosuke asked if there was anything he could do, like cleaning, shopping, or other chores, saying that since Rui was letting him live there, it was the least he could do. Rui replied that Kyosuke did not need to do anything because he had already bought food, and added that they had Tamago to clean, just as the robot vacuum buzzed along and Kyosuke blurted out in disbelief that Tamago was handling it. Kyosuke could only answer weakly that he understood and would see him later, while in the background he was still caught off guard by how quickly this was happening, and with a strained smile he found himself thinking that marriage sure was something. Later, Kyosuke greeted him with an eager welcome home, and happily announced that dinner was ready, only to freeze when he realized Rui was holding out money and asking if he was seriously giving him cash. Rui said he would take the clothes to the cleaners and there was no need, since he would pay to have them cleaned, while Kyosuke tried to insist that he should at least do the laundry, inwardly worrying that he also wanted to say things properly someday, but not now. As Rui walked off, Hiseki had to go to work and told Kyosuke that if he was going to shower, he should do it now and turn the drying vent on when he was done so mold would not grow. Left reeling, Kyosuke broke into a panicked sweat and shouted to himself that this was not marriage at all, that they were a couple already on the verge of divorce. Slumped on the sofa with his head in his hands while Tamago whirred nearby, Kyosuke agonized that he could not do anything around the house without Rui's permission and was the only one taking without giving, then miserably compared himself to a straight-up gigolo and even thought the robot cleaner was more useful than he was. Lowering his gaze in despair, Kyosuke bitterly concluded that he really was just a burden to her. Sitting on the sofa while Tamago buzzed past, Kyosuke thought that if she only wanted the married title, there was no reason to let him stay here, and that he was the only one getting something out of this. As the robot vacuum kept whirring around the room, he realized she still had not turned in the marriage application yet, and he sat there thinking it over in silence until Tamago bumped into something nearby. With a worried look and sweat on his face, Kyosuke wondered if she might be having second thoughts. A packed lunch filled the frame as he proudly finished it, declaring that it was all done. Holding up the bento with sparkling satisfaction, Kyosuke thought that since he had woken up early to make it, it had come out perfect, though he also admitted to himself that she had not asked for it and hoped she would be okay with it. Glancing toward the clock, he remembered that he had a job interview in the afternoon, but figured he could fit in some cleaning before that because he wanted to help somehow, then wondered if she was already awake. He walked toward her room and thought that maybe he should wake her up, just as the door gave a faint little creak. Kyosuke stopped himself, thinking he should wait, because he could not just barge into her room. Even so, he carefully cracked the door open and softly called out, asking, Rui, only to hear a weak groan from inside. The moment he looked in, Kyosuke was hit with shock and shouted Rui's name in alarm as he found her collapsed face down on the floor. Kyosuke dropped into full panic beside her, asking if she was okay while his mind raced from not knowing what had happened to fearing she might be dead. He nudged Rui and called her name, and as she gave weak little huffs, he touched her shoulder and saw her flushed, sweaty face. Staring in shock, Kyosuke realized she had a fever and urgently told her to calm down. Rui forced herself upright and weakly said she was fine and had to move because she was sick, and when he asked if she was seriously planning to go to work, she said she had already called in earlier and was going to buy food. As she tried to go, Kyosuke grabbed hold of her and told her he would not let her, saying she had a fever and needed to rest. Rui looked up at him in confusion and asked what he meant. Looking embarrassed but firm, Kyosuke said that was not exactly what he meant, then explained that she was basically telling him to skip straight to the part where she went to bed, and added that he had already made breakfast. Rui blinked and, still flushed, asked in surprise if he really had. She said he did not have to do that and that she could have at least handled that much herself, but Kyosuke cut her off with a firm no. With sweat on his face and his voice turning earnest, Kyosuke begged her to let him look after her. Rui, red-faced and sweating, looked uncertain and quietly asked if he was sure. Kyosuke gently pressed a cool towel to her forehead and told her to put this on. As she sat in bed, Rui took a sip while he urged her to drink some water. Kyosuke then checked her temperature and reacted in alarm when it came out at 38.9 degrees, saying that was high, while Rui admitted she still could not believe he had wanted to go buy food himself, and muttered that if she did not eat, she would not get better. Smiling with determined enthusiasm, Kyosuke told her there was nothing to worry about and to leave it to him, saying this time it was his turn to help, while he thought he had never known she had this side to her, and thought he could not help it now that he could finally do something for her. Hui then reminded him that he had to eat first, and hesitantly explained that she had made a bento earlier, but Kyosuke immediately apologized for making breakfast without asking, while Rui softly thanked him and said she did not mind, and he added that he would remake it into something easier to digest. When he asked if she was throwing it away, Rui quickly said, of course not, and explained that she would just rearrange the ingredients. Fired up again, Kyosuke said all right, he would get to it, and told her to just relax and wait. He hurried out with the door slamming behind him and from the doorway called back that she needed to get some rest, while Rui quietly answered that she knew. Rui sat in silence with her face flushed, staring ahead as she trailed off without saying anything. She reflected that this had happened because she had neglected her health and that she still had to think about her dad's job too. As the bedding rustled around her, Rui thought it felt strange having someone else in the house. Curling up and clutching her head, she groaned that this was bad, that her head felt like it was bursting. With sweat on her face and one arm over her eyes, Rui looked miserable as Kyosuke called out to her in concern. Standing by the bookshelf, Kyosuke greeted her gently and apologized for waking her up. Still looking weak and feverish, Rui rubbed her eye as Kyosuke told her he had brought some food and asked if she thought she could eat, and she gave a faint yes. On the tray beside her sat a steaming bowl of porridge with a drink and spoon, all freshly prepared. With a small, nervous smile, Kyosuke explained that the bento she had made earlier had cherry tomatoes in it, so he had put them in the porridge, reminding her that she loved tomatoes. Sitting beside her bed, he asked again if she thought she could eat, and when Rui quietly said yes and admitted that she could, Kyosuke looked relieved and said he was glad he had made it, while Rui, blushing hard with the spoon in hand, froze in place. As the porridge steamed between them, Rui, blushing intensely, took a bite and hesitantly asked if it was good, while Kyosuke watched her with anxious attention. Rui said it was delicious, and Kyosuke reacted in surprise, asking if she really meant it. Still flushed and sweating from the fever, Rui confirmed that, yes, it really tasted amazing. Rui told him he had always been good at cooking, and Kyosuke shyly explained that he had always cooked everything at home, so he had learned a thing or two. With the spoon near her lips, Rui added that he was good at other chores too. Kyosuke went on to say he could clean places like the bathtub or toilet that even a vacuum could not reach, that he was pretty good at folding clothes for laundry, and that he could cook all their meals too. Looking serious and a little tense, he explained that what he was really saying was that, if she did not mind, he wanted to help somehow. Leaning toward her bedside, Kyosuke admitted that he had always been the one receiving help, and that he hated being unable to do anything for her. Holding her hand, he said he wanted to do his best to help somehow, and pleaded that he did not want to hear her say again that she did not need him to do anything. Bowing his head, Kyosuke said that if it was too much trouble, she could just say no, but Rui abruptly cried out an apology. Looking down with a tense, honest expression, Kyosuke said he was usually the only person in that house. Rui, sweaty from fever and holding the spoon, admitted she had always thought that if her health ever broke down like this, it would be something she would have to deal with alone. With tears gathering and a faint, overwhelmed smile, Rui confessed she had never imagined that having someone in the house she could rely on could feel so reassuring. Kyosuke flushed bright red and, stumbling over his words, asked if she did not mind, he could help out around the house sometimes, then nervously asked if he really could. Rui immediately agreed with an emphatic shout, and Kyosuke, clenching his fist in relief, thanked her and said she was a lifesaver, adding that he had always been the one getting helped. As the mood softened, Rui noted in surprise that he had even managed to make miso soup without a pot, and Kyosuke casually replied that there was miso soup too if she wanted some, explaining that he had managed it with a frying pan. The empty bowl sat between them as Rui quietly thanked him for the food. Standing by the bed with the dishes in hand, Kyosuke told Rui to get some rest and said he would wash the dishes, but she softly stopped him by calling his name, making him turn back with a puzzled hum. Lying flushed against the pillow, hair spread out and face damp with sweat, Rui looked at him and thanked him. Startled into silence, Kyosuke listened as Rui, still blushing, said his porridge was something she could not wait to have again. Kyosuke froze on the spot, his face turning bright red and sweat pouring down as the weight of Rui saying she wanted to eat his porridge again left him completely stunned. Hiding his face in both hands, he silently thought Rui was unbelievably cute and immediately vowed to make it again, while Rui, still in bed, asked if he was alright and tilted her head in confusion when he only blurted out a shaky response. Carrying the dishes, Kyosuke remembered that he still had a work shift that day, but as he stood there, he glanced back toward Rui's bed instead of leaving right away. The moment he turned, he was horrified to see Rui getting out of bed, and he shouted that she absolutely needed to stay in bed, panicking that he had not noticed the time and blurting out that he was leaving after doing the dishes, while Rui calmly insisted she understood. Even after he hurried out with a cheerful goodbye and slammed the door behind him, Rui remained sitting up in bed, flushed and staring after him in stunned silence. Later, fresh out of the bath with a towel over her shoulders, Rui touched her face and noted that her fever was gone, then muttered that the whole thing had been such a hassle. In the kitchen, Kyosuke was already there washing up and greeted her with a relieved smile, saying good morning and that he was glad she felt better, while starting to mention that breakfast was rare. He cut himself off with a full-body jolt when he realized Rui had come out right after her shower, and he yelled in shock that she was naked. Rui flatly explained that she had just gotten out of the shower, and after his stammered demand that she put some clothes on, she simply answered that he was right. A moment later, Rui reappeared fully dressed as Kyosuke, still flustered, stared in dazed disbelief at how quickly that had been taken care of. With a tired sigh, Rui thanked him again and said it was all because of him, and Kyosuke awkwardly answered that it was no problem while saying he was just glad she had finally gotten over her fever. Holding a cigarette near her lips, Rui said she was surprised and remarked that married life did not sound half bad. The second she said that, Kyosuke lunged across the table in alarm, yelling for her to stop and saying she had just recovered from a fever and was already smoking. As he kept protesting, Rui coolly replied that smoking was exactly why married life sounded so appealing, leaving him to blurt out that he took it back and that married life sounded like a pain, then immediately panic and insist that was not what he meant. After a beat, Kyosuke said that reminded him of something and mentioned seeing the marriage application by the TV, then asked if she still had not submitted it. Rui answered that was right, and when a confused Kyosuke asked why, she told him she had done it for him. Blushing faintly and resting her clasped hands near her mouth, Rui explained that she had thought that if he realized he hated living with her, he would still have the option to back out. She went on to say that Kyosuke was the kind of person who would try to do whatever she asked, like an idiot. Looking at the marriage form on the table, she added that she knew he was the only one who would agree to a marriage while already keeping divorce in mind, and the only one who would even come up with something like that. With only part of her face visible, Rui concluded that was true, and that was why, since she was the only one who kept getting something out of this, she had not submitted it. Looking at the marriage form, Rui said she had wanted to ask whether he was still okay with living with her. Kyosuke immediately protested that she should be asking herself that instead, insisting that of course he was okay, and that he was the one getting the most out of this, while Rui quietly asked if it was really not a pain having her around the house. Rui answered that no, it was not, saying that living alone was definitely easier, but living with him did not sound bad, because for once he was someone who always listened to her. She added that when her parents came over, they would be able to keep up the act better, and as little hearts filled the background, Kyosuke just sat there blushing hard while she left him reeling with a simple pause. Resting her cheek in her hand, Rui then asked how the interview had gone, saying she had a feeling about it. Looking completely drained, Kyosuke admitted that it had not gone well at all. He explained that the manager had gotten angry at him for being late, and Rui gave a small amused laugh before telling him he still had plenty of time left until their divorce. With a faint smile, Rui went on to say that he also had plenty to do around the house to keep busy, so he should not push himself too hard. Surrounded by a fluttery background, Kyosuke thanked her inwardly, thinking that Rui was so kind. Even so, as he looked at her flushed and uneasy, he wondered whether, with someone like Rui, who could do anything, his staying in his house would only end up getting in her way. As Rui sat with her hands lightly clasped, Kyosuke looked at her flushed face and realized he had never known she could think of living with him that way. While they ate together, Rui quietly admitted that it kinda made her happy, and the words sent Kyosuke into a long, rattled silence across the table. A robot vacuum buzzed nearby, and Kyosuke nervously tried to convince himself he was still better at chores than that machine, awkwardly asking Rui if that was true. Rui answered that it probably was, then explained that because eggs were a quick source of protein, she had named the little round vacuum Tamago, saying it was cute and that living alone had made her used to relying on things like that. Looking over at the humming machine, Kyosuke murmured that it must be something important to her. When the robot rolled on with a loud vibration and Kyosuke reacted to it, Rui calmly told him not to pick a fight with it. As the vacuum obediently hummed along, Chisuka reflected that at first he had not understood what it meant to keep divorce in mind in a marriage meant to last 100 days, while Rui urged him to eat and said they should go submit the marriage application that day. Taking a drink, Kyosuke felt that this short time with Rui already seemed deeper to him than their friendship of more than 10 years. Rui ate in profile while his thoughts continued, and he felt that what was growing between them might become something even deeper. With the dishes nearly empty, Rui simply said the meal was delicious, and then told him it was time to go. Beside Kyosuke's uneasy face and Rui's faint, confident smile, the story framed their situation as just the two of them, starting tomorrow and lasting only until their divorce. As the two of them walked out together toward the office, Kyosuke could only think in disbelief that they were really talking about divorce again, even while going to submit their marriage application. Later, in a new chapter, Rui sat down with a lunchbox Kyosuke had prepared, and when she opened it, the neatly arranged meal looked so polished that it came off as a perfect bento. While lifting one of the little octopus-shaped sausages, Rui noticed that Kyosuke's lunches were getting more and more elaborate, and she quietly wondered why hot dogs were shaped like octopuses when that only seemed to make them harder to eat. As Rui sat there thinking with the sausage near her lips, someone suddenly called out loudly to Rui-senpai. The voice belonged to Hayakawa Kurumi, a bright and energetic younger woman who rushed over waving and cheerfully greeted Rui-senpai while praising how cool she looked as always. Kurumi excitedly told Rui that she still could not believe Rui had managed to handle that difficult case, outright calling her a goddess. Rui calmly replied that she understood while Kurumi went on about how the client had been turned down by other law firms and must have been thrilled to get Rui, then gushed that Rui's cool, stoic attitude was enough to make her fall in love all over again. Growing even more animated, Kurumi added that the boss had been singing Rui's praises too and insisted that Rui was still cooler than anyone else, then dramatically wondered why Rui had to see everything as some kind of rivalry. Still sparkling with excitement, Kurumi then said there was also something she had really been wanting to ask Rui-senpai, and Rui simply turned to her and asked what it was. Rui went blank under Kurumi's barrage and silently wondered what on earth was going on with these bento lunches lately, while Kurumi bluntly added that Rui's face was scaring her. Kurumi loudly complained that this was not the Rui-senpai she knew, saying Rui usually ate strange paste or mysterious pills for lunch, and she demanded to know where these super girly lunches were coming from, while Rui thought Kurumi was as loud as ever and looked like her whole world had ended. Keeping her chopsticks in hand, Rui casually revealed that she had gotten married, then added as if it had slipped her mind to mention it. Rui, looking a little flustered, explained that her husband had made this lunch for her. The shock hit Kurumi so hard that she practically snapped backward with a loud slap, internally screaming that she had been completely caught off guard. In total disbelief, Kurumi clung to Rui and declared that she refused to believe it and could not accept it, saying Rui-senpai was too perfect to be suited for marriage, while Rui dryly asked if that was supposed to be an insult. Rui's expression turned sharp as Kurumi furiously demanded to know what kind of back alley guy Rui had picked up, shouting that if he had really made Rui fall in love, then she would beat him up, and someone off to the side tried to calm her down. Still composed, Rui stated once again that she had just gotten married, then lifted the lunchbox slightly and said this bento was proof. Standing beside her seated junior, Rui added that Kurumi knew she could not make something like this herself, and Kurumi had no choice but to admit that was true, even as she remained hung up on the fact that Rui was married. Kurumi still cried that she could never accept it, then suddenly pointed out that Rui did not even have a wedding ring, making Rui pause and look at her hand as the realization began to sink in. Kurumi immediately rejected that idea, insisting there was no way it was true, then wildly guessed that Rui-senpai must have secretly discovered a hidden talent for cooking, since if she tried making lunch and it still came out this perfect, that had to be the explanation, while Rui flatly told her to stop making assumptions. Kurumi folded her arms and firmly declared that, nope, without a ring, Rui was not married, then added that even if she were, Kurumi somehow knew it would only end in divorce, making it clear she was absurdly confident in her own logic. Rui looked down at her hand and quietly repeated, "A ring, huh?" as the thought settled in. With a calm but decisive expression, Rui addressed Kyosuke and told him they were going to buy a ring. Caught completely off guard, Kyosuke looked up in confusion and could only ask what she meant, repeating the word ring in disbelief. Leaning in toward Rui while still holding the cleaning tools, Kyosuke hesitantly asked if she meant a wedding ring, and when that was confirmed, he blurted it out in shock as Rui coolly stated that no one would see them as married without one. The image of a sparkling ring instantly sent his mind racing, but despite saying he was happy she felt that way, Kyosuke admitted with visible strain that he did not really have the money. Rui remained composed and said she knew, which was exactly why they were going to a general store, a statement dramatic enough to make the idea itself sound unbelievable. Kyusuke panicked at once, stammering that they were talking about a wedding ring, right, and wondering if it should be platinum or diamond or have their names engraved on it. Then Rui sharply pointed out that he had just said he did not have the money. Flustered and sweating, Kyosuke hurriedly promised that he would get the money from his part-time job, saying he had just recently done an interview and swore he would work hard and save for it, asking her to wait just a little. As Kyosuke imagined the cost crushing down on him, reality hit hard, and he thought that this was only a pretend marriage, so there was no need to waste time and money on some ring. Another blow landed in his head as he bleakly figured that by the time he saved up the money, they would probably be divorced. The thought kept piling on, and he reminded himself they were supposed to use that money for a house and a full-time job. As a robot vacuum bumped around their feet, Kyosuke immediately apologized, and Rui told him that this was exactly why they were going to a general store, asking if he understood now, then calmly telling him to get dressed so they could go. Before long, the two of them were standing in a shop aisle lined with inexpensive accessories and small jewelry displays as they looked over the selection. Trying one on, Rui said that this one was 500 yen, then added that it looked good as she checked the ring on her hand. Without any hesitation, Rui declared that she was buying it, while Kyosuke shrank back in shock at how fast that decision had been made. Still flustered, Kyosuke asked if they could at least get something cuter, something that would feel different from what everyone else had, and Rui turned to him and asked what exactly she was supposed to be looking for. He started offering ideas one after another, first suggesting a heart shape, only to dismiss it as lame, then pointing out a flower design as big and cute before admitting it did not really look like a wedding ring. Rui bluntly told him that his taste was truly awful, and when he tried to defend himself by saying that beautiful things would look good on her anyway, she coolly replied that that never applied to him, leaving him recoiling in pain. Holding up a ring, Rui says a simple one is fine and adds that she thinks this would look good on him. Blushing and sweating a little, Kyosuke realizes that Rui is choosing based on whether it will look good on him, and he quietly says he understands. In front of the clerk, Kyosuke hastily says that if that is the case, then at least let him pay for it, insisting that he is her husband after all, while the clerk checks if they are sure. Rui accepts with a calm, okay, then says she will go on ahead and look at some cosmetics, and Kyosuke can only awkwardly answer that that is fine. As he watches her leave, Kyosuke thinks that he had imagined this would feel like a date, but to Rui it is just casual shopping. A bright voice nearby gushes that something looks pretty and says wow, making Kyosuke glance over in surprise. He sees a smiling man standing beside a cheerful woman at a display case, the two of them looking close as they browse together. That sight brings back a memory of someone in a wheelchair with a hand wearing a ring, as a voice tells Kyo-chan that once he and his soulmate have tied the knot, he should give her a ring lovelier than anyone else's. Looking down at the shopping bag in his hand, Kyosuke remembers that he has always wanted to give a lovely ring to the woman who would become his wife. Then he stops himself, thinking that this is only a pretend marriage, and concludes that if Rui is fine with it, then he should be fine with it too. Kyosuke jolts himself out of it, shaking his head as he mutters that he should not be thinking about this and needs to find Rui. He walks through the store looking around and reminds himself that she said she was going to look at cosmetics. Meanwhile, Rui stands by the shelves, quietly going through cleansing cream, body milk, and even supplements. Then she sets one item back with a soft motion and thinks never mind, because she has Kyosuke now. A thought follows as she pauses, saying that speaking of him, she recalls how Kyosuke always restlessly fidgets with his clothes whenever he has something on his mind. Thinking it over, Rui reasons that choosing a cheaper ring is probably the most sensible option, but she still seems unconvinced. When Kyosuke finally spots her and calls out to Rui, she realizes that something is definitely bothering him. He asks if she is done shopping, says yeah when she looks at him, and after a brief okay from Rui, he awkwardly asks if she wants to go home. Rui tilts her head and asks what he means, then tells Kyosuke to spit it out. Rui tells him she knows he has a habit of fidgeting with his clothes whenever something is on his mind, and Kyusuke visibly jolts at being read so easily. As he hesitates, Rui asks him to tell her if something is wrong, then bluntly says it annoys her that he is the type who always holds back and puts others first, leaving him mumbling in surprise. Rui listens with a steady gaze and says she understands he is happy about the fact that she is his husband now, but reminds him that she is his wife too, so if something is bothering him, she wants him to be honest with her. Flustered and sweating, Kyosuke says, okay, then awkwardly asks whether she could come with him, and Rui simply answers that she will. Rui looks at him with a small questioning expression, and the scene shifts to the city at night. At the nighttime lookout, Kyosuke asks if the view is beautiful, and when Rui says it is, but asks why they came there, he shyly admits that the truth is he has always wanted to do a romantic ring exchange there. With the sparkling night scenery behind them, he explains that a magical proposal beneath a gorgeous, star-like illuminated sky, and then exchanging rings with each other, has always been his dream. Rui looks at him calmly and asks if that is what he wants to do. Holding the shopping bag at her side, she quietly answers yes. Bowing his head, Kyosuke says he knows he is a useless, unreliable guy, and that he has already accepted that he cannot even give her a proper ring. But still, blushing and looking down, Koyosuke says that, at the very least, he wants to let her give him a romantic ring exchange. Rui flatly asks what the big deal is since they are just giving rings, while Koyosuke stammers and struggles to explain. He says that putting a ring on someone tells them how much they are loved, and that exchanging such cherished rings in a beautiful setting carries almost the same meaning as saying I love you. Kyosuke adds that besides that, she will have something to tell her parents when they ask how the proposal happened, and he thinks a heartfelt proposal story has a stronger impact, while Rui admits that is true. Rui then tells him to go ahead with the exchange and asks what she should do. Facing her under the night skyline, Kyosuke nervously says they should start with him proposing, and Rui calmly agrees, saying he can propose to her under the beautiful night sky and put a ring on her. Panicking as he thrusts the bag forward, Kyosuke blurts out a shaky proposal and ends up shouting for her to marry him. Rui stares at him and answers with complete calm, sure, why not, leaving the moment hanging with that as her response. When that throws him off, Rui points out that there is nothing wrong with that answer because they are already officially married, and says only the order is different, though she adds that it is not like she disagrees with him. Holding up the ring, Kyosuke asks if he may put it on her, and Rui simply says, yes. As his fingers keep slipping from nerves, Kyosuke bows over Rui's hand and carefully starts sliding the ring onto her finger. His heart pounds so hard that sweat runs down his blushing face, while Rui simply watches him in calm silence. Overwhelmed, Kyosuke blurts out that this is making him way too flustered and asks if she is not embarrassed at all, but Rui calmly says no and adds that she is cold, making him apologize and rush to finish. At last, the ring settles into place, and Kyosuke shakily tells himself that, all right, it is done. Looking at her with a dazed smile, he says this moment is now a memory, and then timidly asks if she could do his next. Rui lifts her hand, with the ring now shining on it beneath the city lights, her hair moving in the night breeze. Staring at her glowing in that moment, Kyosuke can only think that she is beautiful. When Rui asks what is wrong, he snaps back, says it is nothing, and then tells her she can put his on too, while she simply says she understands. As she takes his hand and asks if this position is fine, Koyosuke practically bursts with excitement, while Rui's mood stays so unreadable that there is still no visible sign of strong feeling on her face. With his own ring now on his finger, Kyosuke stares at it in a daze and can only murmur that, even so, something about this still feels. Kyosuke suddenly breaks into a glowing smile and says he is so happy, practically sparkling with excitement. As they stand by the railing, Rui asks how he can like something this romantic so much, while Kyosuke admits that the whole idea of romance does not really hold much value for him and says it is hard to explain. Rui quietly says she would say it is because of his grandma, and Kyosuke repeats that she means his grandma. Koyusuke says they have talked about it a lot before, but his grandma has always taken care of him, and he explains that she would always tell him about the memories she and his grandpa made whenever they met, like how he proposed in the luxurious restaurant or gave her flowers, and how she truly believed he was her charming prince. Looking at Rui's hand with the ring on it, Kyosuke says that because he has always heard those stories, he has grown up yearning to have that too. Rui asks if he is okay now, and when Koyusuke asks what she means, she says she means his grandma. With a faint, uneasy smile, Kyosuke says he is fine and that he has been watching her grow old and become senile for a while, so he has prepared himself. Rui says he still looks depressed, and Kyosuke apologizes for what happened back then. With a strained smile, Kyosuke says he was so down in the dumps that people told him it was fine to go out and make a living for a while, and he adds that they kicked him out. He then brightens and says that, Thanks to that, he found a part-time job as a housekeeper, and that it is looking pretty good, adding that he hopes to find full-time work soon, while Rui tells him she knows he can do it and he thanks her. Rui lowers her gaze and apologetically says she feels sorry, adding that she did not do it right, and Keisuke can only ask why. Rui says she knows this was not what he had dreamed of. Seeing her misunderstanding, Keisuke gently tells Rui that is not the case. He breaks into a bright, blushing smile and says she made his dream come true, adding that he is so happy. Rui says that even if this might seem silly since it is only a pretend marriage, she still thanks him and admits she had always wanted to be proposed to like that. Then, looking at him, Rui asks if there are any other romantic things people do. Caught off guard, Keisuke hesitates and awkwardly suggests maybe something like holding hands. Rui immediately says they should do that and plainly suggests that they hold hands, leaving Kosuke stunned. Flustered, Keisuke says that is seriously too much, and insists Rui does not always have to go along with him because having romantic experiences gives his words more convincing power too, asking if that makes sense. Rui calmly explains that, besides, just doing something for someone she likes and making them happy makes her happy too. As they walk side by side at night, Keisuke hesitantly asks if she is sure, and Rui answers with a simple, steady yes. Rui reaches for his hand, and when their fingers meet, she firmly squeezes it as she repeats that she is sure. The two keep walking hand in hand, Rui looking calm while Keisuke goes bright red and trembles with a pounding heartbeat. Overwhelmed, Keisuke realizes he has never held someone's hand before and shyly notices that Rui's hand is very warm. While they continue down the sidewalk, Keisuke wonders what Rui is thinking and hopes she is not grossed out, while Rui simply thinks that his hand feels like a hand warmer. Later, a decorated lunchbox is opened with a dramatic flourish, sparkling with carefully arranged food, heart-shaped details, and ring-shaped toppings, while Rui is shown preparing it. Rui looks at it blankly and wonders what the circles are, then realizes they are rings and thinks that he really must have been so happy. Someone suddenly calls out to Rui-senpai, and a cheerful girl named Kurumi excitedly says that this is the case they were talking about. The moment Kurumi sees the lunch, she breaks down in tears and cries out that there is a ring on it, while Rui can only ask why she is crying. Still sobbing and sniffling, Kurumi says Rui-senpai really did get married, then bitterly adds that it was with some random guy and calls it unforgivable. Rui goes serious and says she will find him. She will, while someone cuts in and tells her to stop because she is taking it too seriously. Clinging all over Rui, Kurumi loudly asks if they are all lovey-dovey together now, and whether Rui-senpai flirts around on her own, while Rui flatly says she has no idea what Kurumi is talking about, and Kurumi keeps rambling about all this lovey-dovey stuff. Kurumi insists this is not like Rui-senpai at all, says Rui has that post-wedding bliss vibe around her, claims Rui clearly does not even know what it means, and argues there has to be some ulterior motive, though she also admits she's not surprised since it is Rui. Rui, with a small pause and a faint, uneasy reaction, repeats the phrase in confusion and wonders what post-wedding bliss even means. Rui's phone starts vibrating with a call from Mom, and she mutters that this is bad because it is her parents, then wonders why they are calling during her break. Kurumi jumps in, demands to know if it is a guy, and declares she will answer it herself, but Rui stops her and says no, it is her mom. Kurumi quickly tells Rui to step out for a second and says she will save her seat, while Rui agrees and heads off. As Rui answers the phone with a calm hello and asks what it is, Kurumi is left behind spiraling that this lunch really is a wedding ring motif and calling it cringe. Rui listens in silence for a beat, then suddenly blurts out a shocked what? Back at home, Rui opens the door and is greeted by Kosuke at the sink, who turns toward her and says, "Oh, Rui," while she answers with "Welcome home, Kosuke." Rui tells him that her parents are coming, and when he asks who, she clarifies that it is her parents. Kosuke jolts in shock and blurts out that they are coming already, panicking that they are not prepared yet. Rui firmly declares that their lovey-dovey training starts now, while Kosuke stares back in confusion and asks what kind of training she means. Later, Kosuke politely says he is heading off now, ma'am, with a slightly stiff smile. An older woman happily thanks Keiyo-chan for staying so late and says the food he made was delicious too, hoping he will make it again for her, while he thanks her warmly in return. As he leaves, someone remarks that she is such a nice lady, but he suddenly notices the time on his phone, gasps in alarm, and realizes he had not noticed how late it was. Walking home with his bag over his shoulder, Kosuke thinks that Rui might be back from work already, and that he has to hurry home and make dinner. The moment he opens the door and starts to say he is home, he freezes, realizing Rui is already there, and can only think in dismay that this is bad. Wearing an apron, Rui welcomes him home and, with a composed look that makes him tense up, asks whether he would like dinner, a bath, or something else. Flushed and sweating, Kyosuke can only stare blankly and repeat in disbelief that she means him. Rui stared at him evenly and asked what exactly he meant, while Kyosuke, already sweating, snapped that he did not even know what he was saying. Before he could recover, Rui moved in with a firm look and raised a kitchen knife in hand as Kyosuke stood close behind her with a strained, uneasy smile. Startled by the sudden turn, Kyosuke asked what this was all about, and Rui simply reminded him that she had already told him. Looking completely serious, Rui declared that their lovey-dovey training was starting today, while Kyosuke could only stare and mutter in disbelief that he thought she had not been serious. Rui explained that her parents were suddenly coming, and since the way things were now would never make them look like a loving couple, they had to train so her parents would not doubt them, while Kyosuke nervously tried to confirm that she meant a pretend lovey-dovey act. Clutching his bag and shrinking into himself, Kyosuke trembled that he did not think he could do this, especially all the things only lovers would do. But Rui flatly reminded him that they were not lovers, they were husband and wife. Then, Rui ordered him to come with her right now, and when Kyosuke panicked and asked whether that was her bedroom, she ignored him, grabbed him, and told him to just come. The next moment, he found himself seated stiffly on the bed, completely frozen in place. Seeing his panic, Rui admitted that she understood why he was anxious, because she did not understand all that lovey-dovey stuff either, while Kyosuke weakly asked why he was even sitting on the bed at all and thought that was not the real problem here. Rui then held up a handwritten lovey-dovey checklist and calmly said there was no need to worry because she had done her research and made a list, explaining that if they followed the tasks in order, they would fool her parents for sure, while Kyosuke could only blurt out in shock what she had done, and Rui insisted that being lovey-dovey was not just some fixed set of moves. Holding her checklist, Rui said the first thing she needed was his consent and approval, and when Kyosuke blurted out whether she took him for her boss, she simply waited for an answer. As his eyes ran over items like lap pillow, kissing each other, and embracing each other, Kyosuke was hit with the dreadful realization that this list was completely misguided. He jolted so hard he nearly flailed like a monkey, and Rui immediately asked what that monkey impression was supposed to be. Trembling all over, Kyosuke cried that kissing each other was setting the bar far too high, while Rui only asked if he really thought so. Still sweating and gripping the paper, he stammered that he wanted to help Rui, but how was he even supposed to pretend to do this? When he nervously asked where she got this research method and what was with all those sticky notes, Rui calmly answered that it came from a shoujo manga. Kyosuke shrank down and admitted he really did not think he could do this, so Rui asked if he could not and wondered whether there was something for beginners instead. Rui agreed at once and said they would start from the top of the list, while Kyosuke, still unsettled, could only ask what she meant. Sitting on the bed in her apron, Rui patted her lap and declared the first item, lap pillow, then told him to come at her, leaving Kyosuke shouting what she even meant by that. With a flat, matter-of-fact look, Rui explained that he was only supposed to rest his head on her lap because people did this even before they started dating in shoujo manga, and Kyosuke awkwardly tried to object that, in their case, the gap was just too huge to suddenly get that close and put his head there. Rui gave in at once and told him to lie down instead, and Kyosuke, flat on the bed and completely lost, could only wonder what she was even saying. Crossing her arms, Rui announced that they would do an arm pillow, while Kyosuke recoiled in noisy shock, and she bluntly noted that even though triumph was written all over his face, this still was not working. Kyosuke desperately argued that this was way closer than a lap pillow and that he simply could not do it, while Rui reasoned that if he could not approach her, then she would approach him, and when he insisted the two things were not the same at all, she coolly asked whether they were not pretty much the same. With one hand over his face, Kyosuke begged Rui to please get off and admitted he was just not cut out for this. And when she asked whether anything would work for him, he protested that just the two of them being on the bed together was already far too much to start with. Rui paused, repeated that the problem was being on the bed, and quietly said she understood. She then moved off him and said this was not on the list, but she had something simple even Kyosuke could do. In one quick motion, Rui produced a pillow with a big yes on it, leaving Kyosuke blurting out in disbelief how that was supposed to help. Holding the pillow, Rui explained that simply putting this on the bed could show how lovey-dovey they were, assuring him they were not actually planning anything intimate, and adding that her parents might possibly peek into the room, while Kyosuke could only stammer helplessly. As Rui pressed the point, Kyosuke nervously asked whether they really had to go that far, but she answered that they did, saying that if just putting this thing on the bed was a problem for him, that itself proved the point, while he faltered that if it said yes, then that meant. Surrounded by a sugary shoujo-style mood, Rui looked back and calmly declared that she was available any time, then matter-of-factly explained that this was what made it lovey-dovey. Hiding his face in his hands, Kyosuke said he could not imagine Rui agreeing to a pretend marriage with a yes pillow, and that even for an act she should not agree to something that blatant just because he liked her, ending in a heavy sigh. Rui immediately said fine, they could use a no pillow instead, though she pointed out with a small sigh that it would not look as lovey-dovey. As the mood soured, she asked which one he actually wanted, and Kyosuke, still covering his face, insisted it was not that he was hurt or anything. Looking fed up while holding the pillow, Rui called him a pain and said they should just do it then, while Koyusuke internally declared that he was going to die. Sitting on the bed with the pillow, Rui reasoned that if they put it on the bed at once, it would amount to nothing, but Kyosuke spiraled, saying he could not even kiss, let alone anything beyond that, wondering why the bar kept getting higher and higher, then blurting that there was no reason they had to kiss and that he could not do this. Rui grabbed him and bluntly asked if all he could say was that he could not, wondering whether it was all just in his head and telling him to simply do it first and judge after, while Kyosuke stammered and, in panic, asked if she was actually against this. Pressing close, Rui told him to just kiss her and judge for himself instead of changing the subject, and when she asked why he could not, Kyosuke cried out that he could not because they did not feel the same way. In a close, tense standoff, Rui said they were doing this to show how they felt about each other, and argued that he could not do it only because he kept saying he could not, urging him to just try because he might be surprised, while Kyosuke could only stammer in distress. Flushed and trembling, Kyosuke turned away, biting down on his hand as he started to quietly break down. Rui, now looking startled, leaned in and told him not to start crying, while Koyusuke loudly insisted that he was not crying. Rui steadied herself, apologized for getting a little worked up, and looked at him with lingering concern. She then said no, this was her fault, admitting that she had always relied on him and that he could not be expected to do the same for her. Hunched over and still shaken, Kyosuke thought that the moment they started this pretend marriage, he should have known it would end with something like this, that he could not do it, and that he should have refused from the start, while Rui quietly urged him to tell her. Looking at their joined hands, Rui asked that if he really could not do anything lovey-dovey, then why had he held her hand? As they sat on the bed, Kyosuke answered that in that moment, yes, he guessed that was true. Rui repeated the word feelings to herself, then said that in that moment, she understood what his feelings were. Kyosuke confessed that he had known she was making an effort for him and had always thought he needed to make an effort for her too, but he was shocked to realize that someone else had been thinking the same way about him, and said he had not understood that until she told him. With his back turned, he wondered if that was really how she saw him, and said that for someone so pragmatic and realistic, it was surprising that she would do so much for his sake. Rui folded her arms and murmured, "Feelings, huh," before admitting with a small sweat drop that she could not really say she understood them. As Koyusuke quietly repeated the word feelings, he realized that Rui had been able to convey how she felt, but he never had. Kusugi lowered his head and thought that maybe, if he understood himself, he could let her know how he felt, but he still did not know how. Suddenly, he seemed to get an idea and blurted out that he knew, making Rui look over in surprise. With a nervous but determined smile, Kyosuke called out to Rui and asked if she wanted to cook together. Rui looked puzzled and repeated, "Cook?" The next moment, they were both in aprons in the kitchen, and Kyosuke appeared fired up as he stood beside her. Koyusuke enthusiastically said he thought they could naturally be lovey-dovey by cooking together, calling it the beta version of lovey-dovey training, while Rui dryly wondered if cooking was not just work. He insisted that cooking together was the same as fostering love for one another, and when Rui admitted that she really could not cook, he quickly told her that was okay and that he would teach her. As Rui worked at the sink, Kyosuke said this seemed like good training since they could both experience being lovey-dovey and cooking, but Rui replied that she found that hard to believe. When Rui asked what they were making, Koyosuke cheerfully said he liked curry and suggested an easy curry that could be made in 3 minutes as he grabbed a boxed mix. Rui immediately shot that down, declaring that they were not using a microwave and were making it from scratch, leaving Kyosuke stunned as he could only react with a baffled what. Rui said they should start by peeling the potatoes and asked if there was a peeler, but Koyusuke admitted there was none, and nervously noted that using a knife for the first time sounded dangerous, making Rui ask what a peeler even was. Rui calmly decided that if that was the case, she would handle the peeling while Kyosuke did the cutting, and he gave a simple okay as they stood side by side in their aprons. Rui quickly handed over a peeled potato, and as it rolled across the board, she remarked that she had finished fast and told him to try cutting it into quarters. Rui brought the knife down with intense force, the blade slamming into the board again and again as she hacked at the potato with a blank, focused expression. Startled, Kyosuke shouted that it was dangerous and begged her not to use only one hand, while Rui, trembling, confessed that she had never really held a knife in her life. Kyosuke hurried over and apologized, then stood close behind her to explain that she should hold the handle tightly at the base like this and use her other hand to keep the potato steady as he guided her into position. Flustered by how close he was, Rui suddenly cried out that she could do it herself, sweat on her face as she reacted in shock. Kosuke jerked back with a pained yelp and stammered out an apology, sounding completely panicked as he asked if she had not noticed. Bowing his head, he awkwardly said he had only wanted to make sure she did not hurt herself and was truly sorry, while Rui quietly remarked that it was surprising he had not been able to approach her like this earlier. Rui immediately told him not to apologize, then raised a thumbs up and encouraged him to keep it up, leaving him stunned in confusion. Rui asked Kyosuke to teach her how to cut them, and when he hesitated and said he did not get it, but thought doing it together would keep her from getting hurt, she told him that just this once would be okay, and repeated his guidance to simply cut straight down. Standing close together at the counter in their aprons, Kyosuke gently guided Rui's hands over the knife and potato as they worked side by side. Rui looked up at him with a teasing smile and said he looked pretty good, while Kyosuke, completely flustered, felt like he might have a heart attack. With his hand still guiding hers, the blade came straight down and cleanly chopped through the potato. Kyosuke suddenly pulled back hard, covering his face as he blurted out why she had not said sooner that she wanted to do it by herself, and declared that he would peel the rest, while Rui quietly noted that he really could not handle this and that they were simply too close. As Rui glanced aside in thought, she reflected that he had done it so naturally, then questioned whether this was another issue with her feelings returning. Trying to steady himself, Kyosuke silently focused on the cooking and resumed working with the knife. Rui called his name, and Kyosuke turned toward her with a blank, slightly wary look. Rui told him that he looked very cool, and he could only stare back in utter confusion. Kyosuke burst into panic disbelief and asked if she was serious, while Rui calmly said she had only said what she was thinking, leaving him wildly wondering what was wrong with that and whether this was somehow part of her training, even blurting out that it sounded like the sort of thing someone would say while hitting on someone. Holding the potato with sweaty hands, Kyosuke was still reeling as he thought in disbelief that Rui really thought he looked cool. The praise hit him so hard that he frantically scrubbed and peeled the potato faster and faster, feeling completely fired up. After finishing the prep, he said that should be everything, with the cut ingredients and a bowl now ready on the counter. Looking blissfully dazed, Kyosuke happily agreed that yes, it was true when Rui told him he looked like he was on cloud 9 and she dryly warned him to get it together before he hurt himself. Rui, still in his apron, held up the oil and asked if he should pour it in like this, and although Kyosuke insisted he was fine now, he quickly told Rui to add the oil next and then spread it around. As the meat dropped into the pot, Kyosuke explained that they would fry the meat first. Standing beside Rui at the stove, Kyosuke explained that once the meat was cooked through, they would add the vegetables, and when Rui wondered why they could not just put everything in the pot and stew it, he answered that frying the meat first would bring out its savory flavor more easily. Watching the cooking, Rui quietly admitted that, honestly, this was kind of fun. Kyosuke jolted and shouted in disbelief over whether Rui really thought so, then beamed with overwhelming relief and said he was so glad, while Rui remained calm beside him and simply agreed. As the meat cooked in the pot, Rui acknowledged the warning not to overcook it and said he got it, while Kyosuke moved on and told him that they should add the vegetables next. The pot bubbled on the stove as Kyosuke said that now they just had to let it simmer, sounding relieved that it had gone pretty easily, and when Rui quietly asked if that was really so, he glanced back at him for confirmation. Then Kyosuke suddenly apologized to Rui, stumbling over his words, and when Rui turned to ask what he meant, Kyosuke admitted that he had not been able to do the lovey-dovey kind of thing he thought Rui had been hoping for. Flustered and blushing, Kyosuke tried to explain that, in his mind, cooking together like this already counted as being lovey-dovey, since showing love could mean wanting to stay close while also giving examples like cuddling or kissing. As he vigorously scrubbed at the cutting board under running water, Kyosuke went on to say that was what it meant to him, adding that whenever he cooked, he wanted Rui to feel happy, and that was why he always cooked with Rui in mind. Still embarrassed, he awkwardly summed it up by saying that cooking was basically his own kind of love language. Kyosuke then burst out that, in other words, if lovey-dovey affection was something that conveyed care, then he could handle that, instead of abruptly deciding they had to start kissing right then and there, though he added a shaky little probably at the end. Rui repeated the phrase, love language, to himself, then calmly said it might not be such a bad idea to let their lovey-dovey stay like this, while both of them kept standing at the sink and counter in the quiet kitchen. Kyosuke quickly blurted out that if he actually tried to kiss Rui, he would probably end up crying, insisted he had not really been crying before, and honestly admitted that he did not think he could handle doing something like that again. Rui answered in an even tone that they were just cooking a meal, but then added that he had thought it was fun, and that he had also thought Kyosuke looked very cool. With Kyosuke frozen in stunned silence, Rui tilted his head and suggested that maybe this was what being truly lovey-dovey looked like. As Rui asked where Kyosuke thought he was going, Kyosuke flusteredly slid away and, red-faced, mumbled that they had just been standing a little too close, while Rui quietly asked if he really thought so. Still embarrassed, Kyosuke insisted that he had not been crying, while Rui calmly said it was a pain when he cried and suggested that maybe it would be best if they acted like they used to. The two of them sat down to eat the finished meal, and one of them politely gave thanks for the food as steam rose from the curry and rice on the table. After tasting it, Kyosuke lit up and said the curry was delicious, then bashfully thought that curry made by him and Rui tasted especially good, while Rui dryly remarked that it just tasted like curry. From across the table, Rui added that it was good and told Koyusuke he could at least sound a little excited, leaving Koyusuke to think that at least it seemed to be working. Resting his cheek in his hand with a blush on his face, Kyosuke wondered if making curry together did not make it feel special, saying it should be just normal curry but asking whether Rui really felt nothing from it. Rui stared back blankly as he sipped his drink and admitted that he did not get it, while Kyosuke took the blunt answer hard. With a soft clink from the spoon against the plate, Rui said he did not see anything wrong with just being themselves. Looking at each other with small, gentle smiles, they both agreed that it was fine to stay like they used to. Rui then said that if Kyosuke's parents ever doubted them, they could simply tell them that this was who they were and that this was how they showed their love. Flustered and blushing, Kyosuke insisted that this really was how they were, while Rui told him to listen and stop acting oddly self-conscious out of nowhere, and Kyosuke quickly agreed. As Kyosuke stared at the calendar and panicked over Rui's parents coming on the 25th, he wondered if this was all happening because he had become self-conscious, called it a very lovey-dovey situation in itself, then immediately told himself to stop and not think anything that would make him even more self-conscious. Letting out a sigh, Kyosuke reminded himself that tomorrow was the day, meaning the day Rui's parents were coming over. Rui tried to calm him by saying they had agreed to act just like they used to, but although Kyosuke admitted that was true, he confessed that he did not know if he could act normal in front of them. Looking thoughtful, Rui remarked that the curry did not taste the same as yesterday and said it was like the flavor had soaked into it, making it taste better. When Rui asked if Kyosuke was not going to eat, Kyosuke said he was fine because he was not hungry and there were only leftovers for one person. But when Rui asked whether he wanted a bite and if he was sure, Kyosuke still held back. Rui then leaned in with a sly smile and, as if saying he had gotten him, fed Kyosuke a bite, which Kyosuke accepted before he could react. Seeing his blank surprise turn into a deep blush, Rui said this was exactly what came from all that so-called reading, each other lovey-dovey training, and pointed out that it had felt so natural that Kyosuke had not even realized it. Covering his face in embarrassment, Kyosuke stammered that it had happened so naturally that his mouth had opened without him thinking, and Rui flatly replied that it had, which meant Kyosuke could be lovey-dovey as long as he did not notice it. Staring back in disbelief, Rui accused him of falling for his lovey-dovey trap and demanded to know what had happened to supposedly staying like they used to. Still red-faced and sweating, Kyosuke protested that Rui was really determined to keep doing all this lovey-dovey stuff, and Rui coolly said that keeping him on his toes while they carried on as usual still left the possibility of lovey-doveyness. Rui called it a pretty good plan, and Kyosuke, completely overwhelmed, blurted out that Rui was trying to kill him. With a troubled sigh, Kyosuke wondered how Rui could stay so crystal clear when it came to this kind of thing, and then Rui's phone suddenly started vibrating. As the call came in, Rui checked the screen and said it was his mom, while Kyosuke froze in alarm. Instantly, Kyosuke's mind raced as he panicked over a phone call from her at this hour, fearing this might be one of those times when they suddenly showed up that very day. In a rush, he started brushing at his hair and spiraling, thinking about how he should have bought better clothes, how he had not even fixed his bed hair, and how he had no idea what to do or whether he should tidy himself up. Then, after listening, Rui answered with a hesitant, bewildered little, "Okay," still tense as he touched his hair. Noticing the change, Kyosuke asked what was wrong, and Rui replied that they could not make it. Looking at the phone, Rui explained that his dad had work, so they could not come tomorrow. Rui quietly remarked that it was good for them, and that they had dodged a bullet, while Kyosuke, visibly relieved, asked if that was really true before admitting he could finally breathe easier now. As Rui's phone kept rattling, he said it was Koisuke's share if he wanted the rest, and Koisuke, still stunned from the call, could only answer with a confused little, "Okay." Rui then stepped over to the balcony in silence, standing with his back to the room as he listened to the call, cigarette at his lips and his expression unreadable. Watching him from inside, Josuke noticed the small, tense smile and sweat on Rui's face and started wondering what exactly was going on. The next morning, Chosuke greeted him brightly with a cheerful good morning and announced that he had made Rui's favorite breakfast, tomato risotto, while Rui simply twisted up his hair as he got ready. Rui sat there eating it without complaint, and Kyosuke, watching him munch away, realized with relief that he was still eating it. But when Rui stood up, Kyosuke looked up in surprise and asked if he was already leaving. Peeking from the doorway, Kyosuke tried to send him off with a "have a nice da," but Rui was already gone before the words could land properly. Left behind, Kyosuke immediately panicked, staring after him and thinking that Rui was clearly in a bad mood. Sitting hunched over on the sofa with his face in his hands, he tried to reason it out, telling himself that the parents Rui hated so much would not be coming after all, so this should have been a good thing, yet Rui still looked down. Then Keisuke grabbed at his own hair in frustration and scolded himself, realizing he was once again dwelling on everything all by himself and calling that train of thought no good at all. Clenching his fist, Keisuke told himself that this time it was his turn to help, and that he needed to properly ask Rui. Then he noticed the sound of heavy rain outside, murmured in surprise that it was raining, and suddenly wondered whether Rui had brought an umbrella. Elsewhere, a girl stretched with a tired groan, saying she was completely exhausted but happy that they could finally go home. As she walked beside Rui, she explained that she had recently been told to look after this new guy as part of his mid-career onboarding, then added in disbelief that now she was even taking care of Rui-senpai too. Seeing the rain pouring down hard outside, she winced and remarked that it was quite a downpour, calling it a yikes moment as the rain hissed in front of them. Looking at Rui's face from the side, she hesitantly called to him and asked if something had gotten him down today. In the next breath, she blurted out a wild guess and asked if he was fighting with his husband. Grinning and clinging playfully to the idea, she assured Rui-senpai that it was okay, said he could even live with her if he got divorced, and added that when that happened, she could make his lunches. But Rui ignored the teasing and stepped straight out into the pounding rain, leaving her shouting in shock that he was seriously rushing into that torrent. She hurried after him under her umbrella, yelling for him to wait, asking if he had an umbrella, wondering why he would go out in the rain like that, and offering to lend him hers. Under an umbrella in the pounding rain, Keisuke rushed up with a strange smile and stammered in relief that, thank goodness, he had made it. Hoi stood there completely soaked, rain running down his face and clothes, while the woman with him cried out in shock that he was absolutely drenched. Keisuke immediately fussed over Rui, saying he had a towel and should dry off when they got home, while also scolding him for going out without an umbrella and asking what would happen if he caught a cold. The woman under the umbrella stared at Keisuke and asked who he was, and Keisuke awkwardly started blurting out that he was just some random weirdo before stumbling over his words. Rui quietly said, "Mom?" Then quickly corrected himself, adding that, no, that was not quite right. Flustered, Keisuke admitted that she had fooled him too, saying he had thought she was Rui's mother, but then added that, actually, she was. Rui calmly finished it for him, saying that he was his husband, while the woman reacted with a loud, shocked cry and someone nearby remarked in surprise that she had finally spoken. As they stood together beneath the umbrellas, Rui thanked Kurumi for her concern and said they would be heading home now, and Kurumi cheerfully told him to call her once he had broken up, while Keisuke sharply asked if she could please not say that so lightly, only for Rui to reply that it was fine and they probably were not going to break up. Kurumi smiled and waved goodbye under her umbrella, saying she would see them tomorrow, while her inner complaint burst out that she could not believe that gloomy-looking guy had taken him away from her. After she left, Keisuke offered Rui the handle of a folded umbrella and simply told him that here was an umbrella. Keisuke said he really could not be bothered anymore and would share the umbrella with Rui. Then, when Rui pointed out that the umbrella easily fit 2 people and asked what the problem was, Keisuke flustered in shock at the idea of them sharing one before awkwardly giving in. The 2 of them walked side by side beneath the same umbrella, the rain hissing around them as silence stretched between them. After glancing at Rui's face, Keisuke quietly told him that he looked kind of down. Rui apologized at once, but Keisuke quickly said it was not because of him and that if he had done something, then that was not it, while they kept walking together under the umbrella. Keisuke admitted that he did not understand it himself, and only said that something was bothering him. Rui asked if Keisuke knew why, and Keisuke deadpanned that he was the one asking, so Rui should be the one to tell him. Rui then suggested that maybe it was related to Keisuke's parents canceling and not being able to come, asking if he did not think that could be the reason. Keisuke paused and admitted that, oh, that might be it. Keisuke said he should be happy right now, but the moment he learned they were not coming, all he could think was that he had not been surprised in the slightest. Rui reflected that it was especially about Keisuke's mother, the one who had kept going on and on about him marrying, and yet even after all that she still neglected him the way she used to, while Keisuke quietly admitted that he just did not know what to make of it. Keisuke said it might look like his parents got along, but that was only on the surface. He explained that the truth was that both of them were on bad terms and had basically given up on each other, yet they could not divorce because it was looked down on and embarrassing. As the scene shifted to their home life, he said they believed this arrangement worked best, since once people married, the husband became the head of the household, while the wife handled the home, no matter how much the 2 of them hated each other. He went on to say that his mother in particular strongly believed women should never be by themselves, so she kept prioritizing his father and following him around despite their strained relationship, even ordering Keisuke to marry despite leaving him behind and going overseas. With a faint, troubled look, Keisuke admitted that being left alone had been the best-case scenario for him, but on the inside, he still could not bring himself to completely get over it. Under the umbrella, he wondered aloud if maybe he was angry, then admitted he really did not know and only knew he was not used to feeling like this. In the middle of that confession, Rui suddenly pulled him into a close embrace beneath the umbrella, and Kyosuke's eyes widened in surprise. Looking up from Rui's shoulder, Koyusuke softly called his name and asked why he was doing this. Rui instantly fell into a sweating panic, stumbling over himself as he tried to explain, blurting out broken apologies and confused half-sentences, while Kyosuke stared at him from up close. Flustered and red-faced, Rui finally managed to say that he had only been listening to him and wondering what he should say or do, and since Kyosuke looked cold and drenched, he had just been really worried. Kyosuke, still pressed close under the umbrella, admitted that he had been at a loss and just... Before he could finish, Rui stood there stiff and panicked, sweat running down his face while Kyosuke leaned against him, and the sudden closeness left the moment hanging in shock. Rui, completely overwhelmed, could only weakly agree, while Kyosuke, resting against him with a softened expression, quietly noted how warm it felt. As Rui kept trembling, Kyosuke apologized and admitted he still had not fully sorted out his feelings, and that he still did not understand this tightness in his chest. Then, with his face hidden as he held on, Kyosuke confessed that even so, doing something like this felt incredibly soothing. Looking up with a faint flush and an unsteady gaze, Kyosuke asked Rui if he wanted to sleep with him tonight. Rui froze completely under the umbrella, staring wide-eyed in total disbelief, and all he could manage was a stunned reaction. The rain-soaked apartment building stood in silence as the weight of that invitation settled in. Rui remained drenched and shaking, his face blank with shock as water dripped from him and his mind struggled to catch up. Left trembling by the door, Rui spiraled internally, wondering how things had ended up like this, thinking it was beyond comprehension, and even asking himself if today was somehow his day of judgment. Rui's hand trembled on the doorknob as he panicked that Kyosuke was waiting just inside, then immediately spiraled into worrying that once he opened the door, they would be heading to the bedroom at night as husband and husband. The moment the door opened, Kyosuke asked what was taking him so long, and Rui let out a frantic cry as he lurched forward in total panic. Flustered, Rui apologized and admitted he was feeling tense, but Koyusuke calmly said this was not part of any husbandly lovey-dovey training this time and told him he was asking for a favor instead, leaving Rui only able to nervously agree. Rui edged into the room and excused himself, but before he could settle, Kyosuke bluntly told him to just get in, and Rui yelped as he was shoved onto the bed with a heavy thump. Curled stiffly at the very edge of the bed and trembling all over, Rui was asked why he was on the edge, while he silently convinced himself that he was the wall, that he had become one with the wall. Kyosuke let out a sigh and dropped down beside him with a soft flop, while Rui lay frozen, sweating, and rigid. Startled by the sudden nearness, Rui peeked over with a nervous jolt and anxiously wondered if he had made Koyusuke angry. Shiosuke shot him a flat glare and clarified that it was not what Rui was thinking, then bluntly pointed out that Rui was way too close. Sitting across from him, Kyosuke explained that lying down together in the same bed was not the same as sleeping together, and said that what he had actually meant was cuddling, leaving Rui to echo the word in confusion. Looking directly at him, Kyosuke said Rui still did not get it, so he told him to look at the shoujo manga and explained that this sense of physical closeness was what he had meant when he asked to sleep with him, adding that this kind of thing was still on the list of stuff he could handle. Rui flopped dramatically and told Kyosuke to come cuddle him already, then immediately protested that he had just said he could not. As panic spiraled in his head, Rui argued that sharing the same bed would not count as sleeping together, while another part of him firmly denied it and insisted it absolutely did. Still trying to say he did not think he could do it, Rui was abruptly slammed forward onto the bed with a startled grunt as Kyosuke forcefully pulled him into place. Rui ended up sprawled there with Kyosuke clinging close from behind, both of them trembling, and while Rui weakly muttered that he was good to go, his body language made it obvious he was not good to go at all. In a burst of overwhelmed panic, Rui jolted upright and begged to be let go, insisting this was supposed to be relaxing, but then his expression shifted as he realized he actually felt calm. Looking down at the person resting quietly against him, Rui noticed the softness in his face and wondered if he was the type who wanted to be spoiled. Rui looked unsettled as he quietly said Kyosuke should not think this was because he was angry or anything like that. With his face partly buried against Rui, Kyosuke admitted he did not really know, then spoke about his mother always putting her dating life first and later going abroad, and about all the times they said they could not come because of work, leaving him wondering sometimes what his existence really meant to them. Watching him closely, Rui gently told Koisuke that what he was feeling was loneliness. As his hand hovered hesitantly over Kyosuke's head, Rui said Kyosuke kept claiming he was better off alone because it was easier, but suggested he might simply have grown used to being by himself, and that even if being alone was one thing, the truth was he could still be feeling lonely too. Rui asked what Kyosuke meant by that, and Kyosuke, sitting quietly against him, pointed out that Rui was not the type to stay silent when something upset him, and added that he got pretty forceful when he was mad, leaving Rui speechless. The moment Rui reached toward him, Kyosuke suddenly grabbed his wrist, making Rui yelp and stammer in shock that he moved fast and was way too quick to use force. Still holding on to him, Kyosuke called his name, and Rui, sounding like he had finally put it together, said he understood now and admitted that he was lonely. With a hand against Kyosuke's face, Rui told him that this was what loneliness felt like, then bluntly remarked that he sounded like a robot who had only just learned what emotions were. Looking at him with a soft smile, Kyosuke said that since they started living together, he had learned something about Rui. Even if Rui liked being alone, he was still someone who cherished other people before himself, whether it was him, Rui's parents, or anyone else. Rui gently told him that it was okay to feel what he was feeling. Bowing his head slightly while staying close, Kyosuke quietly thanked him. Kyosuke took that in and thought that he saw now that Rui was someone who could show vulnerability too, as Rui shifted with a faint rustle. Lying there with Kyosuke nestled against him, Rui was struck by how strange this feeling was, then flushed hard, scolded himself for crying, and fidgeted awkwardly on the bed. With Kyosuke asleep against him and his arms wrapped around Rui, Rui covered his face and agonized over how this could possibly still count as pretending. Suddenly remembering, Kyosuke thought he had completely forgotten, while Rui beside him shifted in his sleep with a few restless little bumps. Looking over at him, sprawled on the floor by the bed, Kyosuke reflected that Rui had always been a restless sleeper. He sat up, feeling as if a kick had left the bed cold. As he looked toward the bed, Kyosuke thought that yesterday's Rui had been a rare sight, and if he could help it, he wanted to support Rui as much as he could. With that decision made, he headed out, thinking it was time to make breakfast, the door creaking as he left. Later, Kyosuke cheerfully greeted Rui with a good morning and told him breakfast was ready, while Rui rubbed his eye and gave a sleepy little acknowledgement. As they sat together, Kyosuke asked what Rui was looking up, and Rui explained that he had read sleeping in warm clothes could make sleep worse, so he had been thinking of buying an electric blanket, which made Kyosuke quietly react in surprise. That immediately made Kyosuke freeze and wonder if Rui hugging him so closely had only been for warmth, and when he hesitantly asked whether there were not any special feelings involved, Rui blankly asked what he meant by special feelings, leaving Kyosuke thrown and confused. Instantly crumpling in embarrassment, Kyosuke backed off, stammering that it was nothing and never mind, while inwardly wishing the ground would swallow him up. Rui, still holding his phone, casually told him he had already made dinner and put it in the fridge, then reminded him that he had the day off and said he would be at his part-time job for most of the day, so he would be back home late. Sitting at the table, Kyosuke said Rui did not have to go that far and he would have managed somehow, but Rui answered that was exactly what worried him. Then Rui simply said he was heading out, and the two stood by the door as he prepared to leave. Rui added that this kind of thing felt very different on his end, and that it even made him blush, so Kyosuke, thrown off, asked how. Looking straight at him, Kyosuke called Rui's name and asked if he was really sure he wanted him here. Rui replied that asking that this late was strange, then explained there was still a chance his parents might come over, so having Kyosuke there would be a huge help. Flushed and intense, Kyosuke started to answer, then blurted out that he would always be there for Rui no matter what. The words hit him at once, and after reddening in silence for a beat, Kyosuke suddenly bolted away with a frantic shout that he was leaving, while Rui watched. A heavy slam followed, and Rui stood there quietly, staring after him with a blank, unreadable expression. As Rui took a few steps, his hand brushed over a pack, and he reflected that it had been so long since this place had felt like it was just him. He moved to the balcony and stood looking outside, then lit one with a small metallic click, the cigarette resting between his fingers. Standing on the balcony with a cigarette between his fingers, Rui looked out and admitted to himself that he had thought he was used to this. Elsewhere, Kyosuke rode the elevator with his bag over his shoulder, cringing over how embarrassing that had been and worrying that Rui had shown no reaction because he might have turned him off. As he arrived, he noted that he had Kamiyare-san today, thought Rui had been calling him in a lot lately, and once again found himself impressed by how amazing Rui's apartment building was. Reaching the door, Kyosuke heard it unlock, stepped forward, and pressed the intercom bell. Rui opened the door in glasses and a knit sweater, greeting him good morning and apologizing that he had not even fixed his hair, adding that he hoped Kyosuke would not mind being called in this early again because he was a lifesaver, while Kyosuke hurriedly said it was no problem. With a small smile, Rui told him it looked cold outside and invited him in, and Kyosuke, slightly flustered, thanked him for having him. Inside, the living room gleamed so immaculately that the whole place seemed to sparkle around them. Rui apologized for the boxes and said he still had not put them away since moving, but to Kyosuke it already looked pretty tidy, and he privately marveled again at how spacious the place was. Then, careful not to sound too presumptuous, Kyosuke asked if he could start making breakfast. Rui looked at him and gently said that he knew, and that he just loved the food Kosuke made. Kyosuke touched the side of his head and shyly thanked him very much. Rui told him that his business cards had just arrived and asked him to take a look, and Kyosuke answered with a quiet understanding, "Oh, right." The moment he saw the card for the law firm with Kamiyata Itsuki's name on it, Kyosuke blurted out in shock that he was a lawyer, and Rui, smiling brightly, said that was right and that despite how he looked, he really was a bona fide lawyer. Blushing, Kyosuke told him he was amazing, adding that it was no surprise and that he had always thought Rui looked well-to-do. Rui happily said that meant he would be there to help whenever Kyosuke got dragged into a case, while Kyosuke could only react in flustered surprise and call him Kamiyata-san. As Kyosuke stared, Rui gave a small, thoughtful "oh" and, with his fingers near his lips, hesitated as if about to add something, leaving Kyosuke quietly confused. Then Rui told him he could just call him by his first name, and Kyosuke jolted in disbelief, explaining that he called him Kyosuke-san, so… Working up the courage, Kyosuke shyly tried it out and called him Itsuki-san. Seeing Rui's pleased expression, Kyosuke thought to himself that he looked so happy. Rui said he would clean up while Kyosuke finished cooking because he did not want to look and wanted to be surprised, and Kyosuke nervously agreed. Looking at the business card from Mizuguchi law firm with Kamiwata Itsuki's name on it, Kyosuke took in that he really was a lawyer, while thinking that Kamiwata-san always showered him with praise. With Rui in mind, Kyosuke thought that it was just like him. The narration shifted to a bonus chapter, saying this was chapter 0 and that the day Rui and he first met was soon after entering high school. In a panic, Kyosuke realized he had forgotten his math textbook of all things and reacted in total shock. Sitting at his desk with his head in his hands, he wondered what he should do, thinking that Sasada-sensei would definitely make an example of him and have the whole class laughing if he did nothing, that the teacher always chewed people out for forgetting things, and that he absolutely did not want his high school life to be like that, yet he had no friends to borrow from. Then someone suddenly held out a book toward him and simply said, "Here," making Kyosuke look up in confusion and ask what. The student was Kodaka-san, who told him not to worry about paying it back and said he understood better than just by listening to him, while Kyosuke stammered and asked what Kodaka-san was going to use if he handed it over, only for him to reply that he did not really need it. When Kyosuke hesitated, the other boy brushed it off, saying so what, that it was not like the world was going to end and that it would be fine, while Kyosuke nervously reminded him that they were talking about the super strict Sasada-sensei. Still sweating with uncertainty, Kyosuke admitted to himself that he was not sure about this. Just then, the classroom door rattled open as a teacher stepped in, and Kyosuke jolted, thinking this was a bad idea and deciding in a rush that he would get it back. Kodaka coolly said he did not need the textbook, and Kyosuke could only give a hesitant, drawn-out, "okay." Then, the teacher stood at the front of the room and announced that he would be checking whether everyone had brought their textbooks. As the teacher fixed his eyes on Kodaka and asked if a dog had eaten his textbook, Kyosuke panicked inside, realizing the attention was now turning completely toward him. Flustered, Kyosuke started to say that actually, he had forgotten his own. Before he could finish, Kodaka abruptly took the book back with a sharp motion and flatly said that he was fine and did not need it. The teacher pressed him, asking if he did not need it and whether he was saying he did not want to take the class, while Kodaka calmly replied that he would not say that. With everyone stunned, Kodaka smoothly declared that when he was in this class he did not need a textbook, because all he needed were the teacher's easy-to-understand lectures. The teacher immediately softened, saying he understood, and the class was left in awe that Kodaka had somehow managed to tame strict Sasada-sensei. Afterward, Kyosuke hurried over, thanked him sincerely, and tried to return the textbook while calling him Kodaka-san. Kodaka told him he had already said he did not need it back, but when Kyosuke explained that he had his own textbook at home, Kodaka relented and said fine, he guessed he would take it back, leaving Kyosuke quietly caught on that last remark. Kyosuke stopped him and asked whether what he had said to Sasada-sensei earlier was really true, and Kodaka simply answered that it was. Resting his cheek on his hand, Kodaka said he could follow just by listening, so he did not need a textbook, and added that, since he had seen someone else struggling without one, it made more sense to give it to the person who needed it. Kyosuke could only answer with a hesitant okay while sweating to himself and realizing she was. As the thought continued that she was definitely an odd one, Kodaka suddenly paused, recognized the item, and asked if it was Ikura-san's and whether it was from Puppy Cake. Looking at the cat-shaped charm, Kyosuke confirmed that yes, it was. The moment games came up, Kodaka lit up and excitedly said that was Kinako Cake, asked if Kyosuke used him a lot, called him his favorite, and praised how good his area attacks were since they hit everything. Around the classroom, the conversation kept rolling as Kodaka admitted he liked Matcha Cake the most and called it a pretty unique game, while someone suggested that if that was the case, he should use matcha cake attached instead, noting that his poison attacks could pile up huge assist numbers, and when another voice teased that liking him for his looks sounded like choosing a main for appearance, Kodaka replied that for the looks he would say, with a small, awkward smile, Kodaka said that, well, did he not look adorable? Though he admitted he could not really use him very well and had only thought he looked cute. From a distance, Kyosuke watched and thought he had been sure Kodaka liked Kinako cake, then corrected himself by thinking that both of them were very cute, while Kodaka quietly said he understood. Glancing over, Kyosuke reflected that maybe he had been wrong, because even if he had thought Kodaka was an odd person, she was getting excited talking about games just like anyone else. Kodaka recalled that the first time she saw Kyosuke, it was obvious he had forgotten something and looked like he was on the verge of collapse, to the point that she wondered just how much of an open book he could be. Seeing how badly he was having a hard time, she said she could not help getting curious, so she handed him her mathematics textbook because she did not need it. But when she did, he only panicked even more, and she found herself thinking that if receiving something from someone made him panic more, then what was with him? She reflected that it was like that even when they were talking about puppy cake. As the Kainako cake charm was held up, Kayusuke nervously brought up a theory he had read about Kainako, saying people claimed the blotches on his cheek looked like stains and that they were tart parts left uneaten because no one ever picked them. Hearing that, he broke out in distressed sweat and blurted out that it just made him wish Kanako all the happiness in the world. Watching him, Kodaka went quiet and concluded that he was definitely an odd one, while nearby the others dismissed it as just a theory, and Kyosuke said he would feel terrible if it were true. Still, when she talked to Koyusuke, it did not take long for Kodaka to realize that the way they thought was completely different, and she could already tell he had a very different kind of sensitivity from hers. At the same time, Kyosuke felt that whenever he talked to Rui, he could never tell whether she was scary, too serious, or simply brusque, and could only think of her as someone shrouded in mystery. Yet as they faced each other in class, with Kodaka reaching a hand toward his desk, the thought settled that this was someone he wanted to know better. Smiling to himself, Kyosuke noted that it had been exactly a month since they got married and called it their month-iversary. He imagined they would both have a wonderful time, thinking the timing could not be more perfect since it was Rui's day off, and pictured himself cooking something lavish, getting flowers to decorate, and maybe even baking a cake. Then, looking a little strained, he admitted to himself that he might be getting a bit too excited about this. In the kitchen, he reconsidered and thought they might just celebrate a little, maybe with something quick and small, perhaps origami, while deciding that a sweet cake like cheesecake sounded good and worrying that Rui would only complain about the cleanup and decorations. Even so, he proudly revealed a table full of food and sweets with a bright ta-da, saying he wanted to celebrate their first month by going all out. Rui, in the middle of tying her hair, asked what first month he was talking about, and when he declared it was their marriage month-iversary, she replied that she had not realized it had been that long, while he cheerfully said yes and added that he knew it was more for him than for her, but felt it was the thought that counted. Giving him a cool look, Rui asked what the point of all this was, while he awkwardly tried to explain that it had been a month, so he thought, you know. As he stood by the loaded table, Rui flatly said there was really no reason to celebrate just because a month had passed, and he fumbled that maybe so, but it was like recognizing how far they had come. Looking uneasy, Kyosuke started to clarify that there was still a long way to go and that today did not have to be so special, then corrected himself and said that was not what he meant. Sweating under the pressure, he tried again and said it was just 1 month, but because they had reached that point and made it through 1 month, that was why he wanted to celebrate. Kyosuke, flustered and sweating, insisted that what he was trying to say was that spending a month together meant something, then pleaded for Rui to understand. Rui coolly asked what kind of meaning that was supposed to have, and whether it meant all the time they had spent together before marriage counted for nothing, making Kyochuki immediately blurt out that he never said that. Rui then asked why they were celebrating just because a month had passed, and with the mood collapsing, Kyosuke awkwardly told her it was fine, asked her to forget he had said anything, and suggested they should just eat while the food was still warm on the table. Looking downcast, Kyosuke admitted to himself that he had hoped they could enjoy their month-iversary together, but figured Rui was obviously not interested in that kind of thing, and that maybe he had really gotten excited over nothing. As Rui ate, she bluntly asked again what the point was, while Kyosuke hurriedly said she should just forget it, and mumbled that he had only been saying it for his own sake. Rui asked why 1 month was supposed to be a reason for celebration, then dryly wondered if it was because the quantity and quality of their lovey-doveyness would go up, adding that she probably knew more about this than Kyosuke did, and he weakly protested that it was not always about statistics. Fidgeting with his collar and sweating under her gaze, Kyosuke repeated her question to himself, wondering what exactly made 1 month so special. Bent over the table with one hand covering his face and a fork in the other, Kyosuke said that if Rui thought all of this was only about quantity or quality, then she would never understand how he felt. Hui looked at him in confusion and simply asked what he meant. As Keisuke suddenly rose from the table, Rui apologized at once, but he only said he needed to go to work. As Keisuke headed out and the door shut behind him, Rui called for him to wait and asked, confused, why he was leaving. Outside the apartment building, Kyosuke lowered his head and admitted to himself that he had walked out. Still looking shaken, he realized he had left without even cleaning up and worried that he might have only made Rui anxious for no reason. Thinking back on it, he told himself that she was right, that this was only a pretend marriage, and that there had never really been any reason for a celebration. With a heavy sigh, Kyosuke rang a nearby doorbell and stood there slumped, waiting. The door opened almost immediately, and a smiling Itsuki greeted him by name and cheerfully remarked that it had been quick. Seeing him properly, Itsuki said it was obvious something was wrong, asked if he was feeling sick, and pointed out that he looked paler than usual, while Keisuke blurted out in surprise that Itsuki could tell. Itsuki studied him closely and noted that his eyes were a little red, then gently asked whether something bad had happened. Flustered, Kyosuke started to deny it, but Itsuki quickly wondered if he had hit the mark. With a calm smile, Itsuki invited him inside and said he would be happy to listen, and Kyosuke awkwardly agreed while thinking that Itsuki was such a kind person. Looking around the room, Itsuki said he understood and summed it up as a disagreement with his wife. He then put it more plainly, saying that, in other words, Kyosuke and his wife were in the middle of a fight. Caught off guard, Kyosuke repeated the word fight in confusion and asked what he was talking about. From across the table, Itsuki calmly said he would call it that, adding that their different views had made them clash, and Kyosuke hesitantly admitted that, now that he mentioned it, maybe that was true. Turning the idea over, Kyosuke quietly repeated that word to himself and wondered if this really counted as a fight at all. As his chopstick slipped down with a soft plop, he put himself down, saying he was stupid while she was smart, and that there was no way he could ever go head-to-head with her. Itsuki disagreed, reminding him that he had clearly shown Rui how much he cared about their month-iversary and that he had even been able to speak up about it. Then, saying he was on Kyosuke's side, Itsuki added that if he were with the person he loved, he would want to celebrate every month as well as every year, and Kyosuke quickly agreed. Even so, Itsuki admitted he felt a little jealous, making Kyosuke blink and ask what exactly he meant by that. With a distant look, Kyosuke reflected that a partnership where both people could freely voice their feelings and talk things through sounded like a very lovely kind of relationship. Itsuki gently told him that even if he thought he was foolish and his wife was smart, the fact that they could share their points of view and even argue about them showed that the two of them were equals. Then, Itsuki asked if Keisuke's wife was at work right now, and when Keisuke said no and explained that it was her day off, so she was home, Itsuki immediately reacted. In shock, Itsuki blurted out that if she was home, then why was Kyosuke here doing his chores, slammed the table, and told him to go back to her, while Kyosuke could only stammer that he was supposed to be working. Keeping a serious look, Koyusuke was told that the uneasiness he was feeling was surely the same uneasiness his wife was feeling too, and that since it was their month-iversary, there was no better place for him to be than by her side. Sweating and thrown off, Kyosuke weakly agreed, and Itsuki answered with a bright smile, as if to say, that settled it. As Kyosuke hurried off carrying the dishes, Itsuki called after him to at least wash them first, then added with a flushed face that his dedication to the job was wonderful. At the doorway, Itsuki thanked him for today and said he would see him next time, while Kyosuke headed out. Walking alone outside, Kyosuke quietly repeated to himself that he and Rui were equals. That thought brought back Rui's earlier voice calling his name and teasing that he really did listen closely in class. In the memory, Rui sat beside him and said the teachers were doing it for them anyway, while Kyosuke pointed out that they were only saying what was already written in the textbook and wondered if it would not be faster to just read it himself, leaving Rui to answer that maybe that was true. In the classroom, Kyosuke apologized softly, and Rui immediately asked who he thought he was apologizing to, then bluntly asked how he had even managed to forget finished homework, since that completely defeated the point of doing it in the first place. Later during a game, Rui angrily shouted that they had lost because Kyosuke had mistaken something and died, demanding to know why he kept dying, while a tiny, crushed-looking Kyosuke apologized again and admitted he was bad at games. At another moment, Kyosuke hesitantly brought up that the two of them seemed pretty close. When Rui asked, "Yeah, so?" Kyosuke awkwardly said it was nothing, only that he had been thinking people might start spreading rumors, and Rui repeated the word as if questioning it. Rui said he did not really understand why anyone else would care how close they were, adding that whatever was going on between them was nobody else's business. Then, Rui looked at him and asked if that was right, Kyosuke, and he could only give an uncertain agreement. Someone then teased that Kyosuke must have his hands full with a beautiful wife like Rui, and while Kyosuke gave a faint, embarrassed response, the comment that the two of them were really flirting made the mood even more awkward. With an intense stare, Rui told him not to worry about those people and firmly said that he was the one Kyosuke spent time with. When Kyosuke worried that if Rui was around, people might start talking, Rui turned to him and asked what he meant, then said there was nothing for him to worry about. Koyusuke, still sweating uneasily, said he understood and hoped inwardly that hanging out with him was not causing Rui any trouble. Kyosuke remembered there had always been something he wanted to say, but because things had always been one-sided between him and Rui, he convinced himself that staying quiet was the right thing to do. Thinking back on how things used to be, he compared them and saw Rui speaking sharply to him while he faced her with the same tense uncertainty. Now, he realized he was able to speak his mind much more than before, and as he clenched his fist, he wondered if this counted as personal growth. As he moved through the hallway, he reflected that unlike before, the two of them were standing on more equal ground now. Then he suddenly froze when he found Rui waiting there with her arms crossed, and in shock he blurted out her name as a stunned cry escaped him. Rui immediately demanded to know what he was doing there, and when Kyosuke saw her flustered face, he panicked and blushed, briefly thinking she might have come to make up with him. In a rush, he stumbled closer and apologized to Rui, saying he had just run away like that. Rui shot back in disbelief, angrily reminding him that they were still in the middle of a fight, leaving him reeling in confusion. Flustered, Kyosuke insisted he had come to end this as soon as possible, while Rui snapped that he could not just celebrate something, vanish, and then reappear, calling him a dummy, and he weakly admitted he had no excuse and still did not even know what he was supposed to be celebrating. Hearing that, Kyosuke looked down and thought, no, it should not be like this. Kyosuke apologized to Rui, saying he was sorry, that he knew how smart she was, and that because of that he did not think he could convince her, so lacking confidence, he ran away. As Rui stared at him, seemingly wondering why the one who caused the hurt was the one apologizing, Kyosuke bowed and admitted that it still hurt a little, but he had been trying to think of it as simply increasing both quantity and quality, and after all that, he felt he had to apologize. Sweating nervously, he went on that if they were both fighting, then should it not leave both of them with an uneasy feeling, and he thought that was exactly why he needed to apologize. Woody stepped closer and said she had actually been happy that he talked back to her, and Kyosuke could only stare and ask if she really meant that. In profile, Rui told him plainly that he was someone who was always biting his tongue around her. As Kyosuke looked stunned, Rui explained that when he talked back to her earlier, it had really made her happy. While the two stood in the hall, Rui apologized and said she did not understand why he ran off, while Kyosuke quietly admitted that he had not known she felt that way and that he was glad they were able to have a fight like that. Rui immediately burst out that of course he should understand, demanding to know if he had any idea how lonely she felt when he ran away, then angrily insisted she had only recently passed the course on loneliness, so she knew, and snapped that while she had told him about it before, that was not how it worked, leaving Kyosuke shocked as he repeated that she had been lonely. With her arms folded, Rui then admitted that he was right and that she had been feeling uneasy, saying that was why she came to get him, while Kyosuke faltered in surprise. Turning slightly away, Rui confessed that she had been worried that he would not come back home if things stayed like this. Rui said she liked being alone and that being alone was easier, but ever since she started living with him, everything kept getting turned upside down, leaving Kyosuke staring at her in shock. Flustered and blushing, Kyosuke asked if this was not really about increasing both quantity and quality, and Rui gave him a flat look as if to say no, it was not. Rui stated plainly that she was lonely, that was all, and someone dryly remarked that she probably was not supposed to say that with such a straight face. Rui apologized and admitted that even now she still did not know much about him, but said that ever since they started living together, she had learned so much about herself. Looking down with a small, strange smile, Kyosuke said no, it was his fault for not speaking up, while thinking that he had just been getting carried away by the idea that Rui was always right. As Rui listened in profile, Kyosuke thought that the two of them should both be thinking, worrying, and deciding together how to move forward with these things. Kyosuke then realized that was right, that they were equals, and that if there was something he wanted to say, then he should say it. After an awkward pause, Rui finally asked what this so-called monthversary even was, while Kyosuke could only sweat and mumble. Hesitantly, Kyosuke explained that she could think of it like a birthday, and when Rui asked if that was really it, he added that whenever a year passes after something is born, people celebrate it, right? Growing more animated, Kyosuke said that days like these have special meanings, that it is important to commemorate the day someone was born or the day someone got married, so in the same way they celebrate a month or a year from the day of a wedding. Sweating and rubbing the back of his head after getting smacked, Kyosuke could only weakly say that he saw, while Rui coolly remarked that he seemed to be having a fun life. As he reeled, Kyosuke wondered why he was suddenly being put down, and Rui matter-of-factly said it was not sarcasm, it was a compliment, even as the exchange still came off that way. Flustered, Kyosuke hurriedly told Rui to listen, saying that she sometimes blurted things out spontaneously like that he actually had a lot to say about it, that it was just something that bothered him at times, and that he simply did not have what it took to bring it up himself. Looking worn out and a little resigned, Rui told him, okay, she understood. With a gentler expression, Rui said they should talk about it while they walked, then held out her hand and told him to come on, let us go home. Their hands clasped tightly, and as Rui looked ahead with a faint smile, Koshuke quietly agreed. Walking beside her and still embarrassed, Yusuke finally said there was something on his mind, then admitted that Rui could be a little floppy sometimes, mentioning that whenever she got home she just tossed her shoes on the floor and sometimes opened doors with her foot, while also saying he thought she would need to get used to that because otherwise she could get hurt. The scene shifted to a bright memory as a cheerful girl called out to Rui senpai with a huge smile and excitedly invited her to come eat lunch with her. In that flashback, someone observed that it looked like Yosuke senpai was once again being dragged into one of the cringe lunches, while another asked if he was not grossed out. Off to the side, someone clicked their tongue and muttered that it was all about the taste, while another defended him by saying no, his lunches tasted good. During lunch, a cheerful coworker admired the feast Rui had brought again, then praised herself as a good cook and said Rui only had to say the word if she wanted the same treatment, while Rui laughed that having so much good food to eat was not a bad thing at all. As they ate together, the woman admitted she had been really surprised because she had never known Rui's husband was such a homemaker. Rui flatly replied that if he had been some flashy ultra-hot heartthrob, she would have beaten him up, then added that the way he had looked so weak had only made her want to beat him up anyway, leaving the other woman to joke that apparently every road led to him getting beaten up. The conversation shifted when Rui mentioned the new guy who had just started, the one she had been told to look after, and her companion pointed out that he had kept staring at Rui during work, which made her want to smack him, only to be told to calm down with the violence. Rui went on to say that people around the office were speaking well of him, but she still was not convinced, especially because he was such a pointless pretty boy and clearly the high-spec type. Hearing that, the other woman happily murmured to herself that Rui was completely uninterested, and to her that was proof Rui-senpai was deeply in love. She then warned Rui that someone with such stunning, jaw-dropping beauty was bound to attract all kinds of creeps, though she still thought Rui would be fine as long as she kept that in mind. When she asked for the new guy's name, Rui thought for a moment and answered that it was Kamiwara Itsuki, as an unseen listener in the background suddenly tuned in. A tall man in a suit appeared behind them, and both women looked up in surprise as he greeted Rui by saying it had been a long time and addressed her directly as Rui-san. The man smiled and repeated that it had been a long time, and then the other woman turned with a sharp look as she echoed, Rui-san. Startled by the man calling her Rui-san after saying it had been a long time, the woman beside Rui blurted out in shock that he knew who she was, while Rui herself went blank and echoed that it had been a long time. The coworker snapped that it was unbelievable for him to know Rui when Rui did not even know him, but Rui, still staring at him, calmly apologized and asked who he was again. Then Rui paused and said she thought she did know him, asking if he was from college, which made her companion jolt and exclaim that the two of them really did know each other. With a composed smile, the man revealed that he and Rui had dated in college, instantly sending the coworker into a stunned, wordless spiral. Rui looked at him and matter-of-factly remarked that it really had been that long, and that they had not seen each other in ages, while her coworker mentally short-circuited, trying to process that this meant he was Rui-senpai's former boyfriend. Panicking, the coworker urgently told Rui-senpai to put her phone away because this was the boyfriend she had broken up with, then nervously added that having an ex working at the same company seemed suspicious, only for Rui to repeat the word suspicious back at her. As the coworker flared up and demanded how he could act like he knew Rui, calling him a bastard, the man answered evenly that he had dated Rui-san and that she was not that kind of person. He went on to admit, with a faint smile, that back then he had not understood Rui very well and simply had not been able to keep up with her. Rui listened in silence while he explained that because he could not measure up to her, they ended up breaking up, and now for the past couple of years he had been working on himself so he could become someone worthy of dating Rui-san, carrying those efforts with him to the present. Looking at Rui with a gentle smile, he concluded that this was why, if she did not mind, he wanted to ask whether she would go out with him and start dating again. Rui calmly apologized and said she was already married, while the man facing her simply replied, "Sorry?" The two onlookers were completely shocked, with one blurting out that Kurumi had known this. As the stunned silence dragged on, one of them tried to process that Rui-senpai's ex-boyfriend had shown up and that Rui-san was already married, while inwardly wondering what was wrong with these people. Rui, still holding her phone, gave a small nod and said she needed to get back to work. She stepped away with a polite farewell, telling them to see her later as the other two stood there frozen. The dark-haired woman then flatly told him that was that, and whether he was Rui's ex or whatever, he might as well give up on her. Watching Rui leave, he quietly repeated to himself that she had gotten married. Then, touching his chin in thought, he reasoned that if she was married, he would need her to get divorced. In another room, the dark-haired woman jolted upright in disbelief, screaming out a huge "what?" Sweating as she thought it over, she questioned what was wrong with these people, noting that Rui-senpai was not even asking why her ex had shown up at her workplace, and wondering what was wrong with him too, since he was trying to get her to divorce, even if she could partly see where he was coming from. Back in the office, the man approached Rui's co-workers while they looked startled, and Rui could be seen in the distance, still at her desk. Nearby, two women gushed that Kamiwara-san was so cool, so capable, and already so busy, while Rui kept working quietly at her computer. Rui internally shot that down at once, thinking he was not cool at all and was just a creep plotting someone's divorce. Then the man spoke up and called out to Rui-san. A grim-faced coworker immediately stepped in and coldly told him that if he had any business with her, he would have to go through her, and when he replied with a dry who says, the tension only sharpened. Rui stated again that she was already married, while the coworker pointed at him and bluntly added that he was trying to get back together with her and had even followed her to the same company like a stalker. He calmly admitted that it was true he wanted to go out with Rui-san again, but since she was already married, that was that. Rui answered with a flat thanks, then added that no, there was really nothing she could do about it. The coworker suddenly cut in, saying to hold on a second because it was obvious Rui-senpai was a perfect being, though she also noted that she had heard Kamiwara-san was very competent, even if she did not personally agree. Looking at him seriously, she said it seemed like he and Rui did not really need each other. So why were they even dating? And reminded him that he had also told her Rui had an ex-boyfriend, leaving him to wonder why that had happened in the first place. As the story came out, he said that back in college he had confessed to her, and when she had casually said sure, they started dating, leaving the coworker in absolute shock as she blurted out that it had taken all that just for her to go out with him. Then he suddenly bent forward and pleaded with Rui-senpai to go out with him again, only for Rui to firmly repeat that she was already married. He went on to explain that they had started going steady. But in the end, she had told him she did not really feel the need to date someone, so they broke up, while the coworker muttered that it was actually kind of harsh, though she also admitted she would not put it past Rui. With a restrained expression, he said that was why he had thought he needed to become a better person, someone worthy of her and someone she would feel the need to date. He continued that after graduating, he had gone overseas to study and improve himself, and that he had even met Rui-san's parents, while the coworker dryly noted that her parents really had managed to expand overseas. Watching the exchange, the coworker could only think that she just could not imagine these two dating at all, since he was only talking about himself while Rui was giving nothing but empty responses, making her wonder why they had even dated in the first place. A man called out, "Hey Kamiwara," and with a faint smile he answered that he was coming, then said he needed to go and would see them around before leaving. After he was gone, the coworker turned toward Rui at their desks, called to her carefully, and finally asked why she had dated that guy. Rui answered in her usual calm way that when he had approached her and confessed, she had thought there was some merit in experiencing romance rather than just living her usual life, so she agreed. The coworker immediately summed that up as a very Rui-senpai kind of response, then said that in the end, Rui had felt there was no real need after all. Asked why she had decided to marry Kyusuke-san, Rui calmly said that unlike with Kamiwara-san, she had felt there was a need, and when pressed on what that meant, she admitted she had wanted to fool her parents. Left to herself, the coworker could only wonder why she had gone with him in the first place, thinking that now that she considered it, she really did not understand. Rui fell into complete silence, and even when the coworker tried calling hello and asking if Rui-senpai was listening, she could only conclude that Rui was in her usual deep-in-thought mode. Letting out a sigh, the coworker said that if anyone asked, those two were on completely different ends of the spectrum, so she had to wonder whether there had really been any reason at all for Rui to choose Kyosuke-san. Then she suddenly stopped herself, realizing that if she actually knew the answer to that, it would mean she understood Rui-senpai best. Hunched over at her desk, she pushed herself to think, insisting there had to be some special reason Rui-senpai had picked a loser like him, and that Koyusuke-san had to have some good points somewhere. But after all that thought, she arrived at one explosive conclusion over lunch. There was absolutely nothing. Thinking it through, she judged that he did not look reliable at all, that Kamiwara-san was definitely delusional about Rui, and that while she did not know either man well, they both seemed creepy, making her wonder if Rui had simply picked Kosuke-san from two bad options. For a moment, she even caught herself thinking that maybe Rui-senpai might notice her if she acted like a hopeless girl, but she immediately slammed that idea down and scolded herself that it was wrong, and that she should be supporting Rui instead. In the end, half crying over her meal, she groaned that she simply did not get it at all and declared that she would bury these questions in food. Spotting him in the store, she realized in surprise that it was Kyosuke-san. As she watched him stand there with a plastic bag, she wondered if he was here to buy something, while also thinking he really did give off the vibe of a mom casually hanging around with a slightly shabby bag. Debating what to do, she considered that it might be better to just go straight up and ask him, or maybe simply watch from a distance and see if something interesting happened. Before she could decide, Rui-senpai appeared behind him, and the startled co-worker almost yelped in shock as she recognized her. Her eyes lit up as she seized on the moment, thinking this was her chance to finally see how Rui-senpai acted in front of him. But as the two spoke, Kyosuke-san suddenly looked flustered, and she nervously wondered why he seemed so agitated when Rui-senpai was only talking to him. Then his arm shot out toward Rui, making the co-worker recoil in alarm and dramatically conclude that they were actually battling it out. Slurping up her food while watching, she broke into a sweat and questioned whether they really did not get along, then immediately doubted herself and wondered if their relationship might actually be equal enough for him to stand up to the peerless Rui-senpai. Seeing them move toward the counter together, she guessed they were probably just buying food before going home. Studying Rui from afar, she thought Rui's expression might be a little softer than usual, maybe with the angle of her eyebrows lowered by a few millimeters, then instantly rejected the idea and told herself there was no way that could happen with him. Watching the pair after they finished buying something, she was thrown off by how close they now seemed and wondered what she was even seeing. As she looked at Rui, she realized there were so many different sides of her that she had never seen before. Rui wore a faint, gentle smile, and that one expression completely captivated her. Clutching at her scarf, she thought in awe that Rui-senpai's smile was so lovely. Staring at Rui from afar, she could only mumble Rui-senpai's name and trail off, unable to put the feeling into words. Then the truth hit her hard, and she blankly realized that smile had been for him, not for her. Instantly spiraling, she grabbed her head and silently raged over what that loser guy even had, why Rui-senpai only ever made that face in front of him, and what he even was. The scene shifted to Rui and Kyosuke-san, where he awkwardly said that having takeout once in a while should be fine, and she answered with a hesitant yes before reacting to something off to the side. Spotting her there with food, Rui simply called out with a mild "oh" and addressed her as Kurumi. As Rui and Koisuke-san stood behind her, Rui noted that Kurumi-san had been eating for quite a while and that she seemed to be eating well, while Koisuke-san observed that this girl brought triple-decker bentos for lunch, leaving Kurumi to stiffly agree as he privately concluded she must just really love big meals. Kurumi suddenly dashed off with a loud "hey," catching Kyosuke off guard as she grabbed him, making Rui call out in surprise and ask if it was Kurumi-san. Facing Rui, Kurumi urgently told Rui-senpai to wait right there, okay, while demanding to know where they were going. After rushing away, both Kurumi and Koyosuke bent over, breathing hard as they tried to catch their breath. Looking worn out and confused, Koyosuke addressed her as Kurumi-san and asked what that was about, and she only answered with a baffled, huh. Kurumi exploded, saying it was the first time she had ever seen Rui with that look, insisting she could not believe Rui-senpai could make such a soft expression. And when Kyosuke awkwardly asked if there had really been 3 lines on her cheek, she fixated on that too and repeated it in shock. Fully convinced, Kurumi declared that was definitely the face of someone who had fallen deep, while Kyosuke could only stare back in confusion and weakly ask what face she meant. She immediately twisted his cheek hard while furiously asking if he was actually denser than a black hole, and he yelped in pain over and over. As Kurumi broke down sobbing into her hands, she admitted it was just as frustrating for her because she had kind of already known from the start, while Kyosuke nervously tried to stop her and asked what she was doing. At the same time, she bitterly admitted that even if Rui-senpai did not really see anything in him that way, maybe he still had as much charm as she did. With a darkly serious glare, Kurumi told him to listen, and listen well, Kyosuke-san, while he meekly answered, okay. Grabbing him again, Kurumi said she was going to acknowledge that Rui-senpai had picked him, but she also warned that with his lack of self-confidence, she doubted he would be able to support her, insisting Rui was someone who could do anything by herself, you know. Kurumi grabbed Kyosuke and shook him hard, yelling that he needed to understand what it meant to be chosen by her, while he could only give a rattled yes. Still being shaken, he said he could not hear her properly, then quickly corrected himself and answered yes, more clearly. Kurumi coldly asked what the two of them had been fighting about and warned that whether he caught these hands depended on his answer, while he nervously admitted he felt like he had already caught some. Koyusuke explained that Rui had said that instead they should get takeout sometime, and he added that Rui-senpai was really kind. He went on to say that he had really wanted to cook for her, and since he had already bought the ingredients and had them in hand, he trailed off, while Kurumi stared like she thought he was a real pain. He tried to defend himself by saying Rui was just trying to be considerate of him, but Kurumi flatly told him that, in the end, he folded. Kyosuke said he had never seen that before, and when Kurumi pressed him about that smile, he sounded genuinely surprised and asked if she really meant it. Looking flustered, he explained that they had only been talking about what they bought, and said that Rui might look stoic, but she could smile just like anyone else. Kurumi immediately smacked him and shouted that it was only because it was him. As Keisuke reeled, Kurumi yelled that Rui was only like that in front of him and that the fact he did not realize it made her even more annoyed. Then she declared that it had been a genuine, heartfelt smile and demanded to know whether they were really husband and wife, because they looked like they had just started dating. Kurumi grumbled that if he wanted to be clear, then he should plainly declare that he was Rui's husband, adding with a weary gi that Rui-senpai's ex showing up had already caused plenty of commotion in the neighborhood. She kept pushing him, telling him to come on and say it, while he stood there awkwardly until she smacked him again to force the point. Flustered and sweating, Kyusuke finally stammered it out and declared that he was Rui's husband. Kurumi instantly exploded, shouting what the hell he had just said and refusing to hand Rui over to someone like him. Then admitted that now she was confused about whether she was for them being together or against it. As they started walking, Kurumi said she had said what she wanted to say, and told him they should head back before they made Rui worry, while Kyusuke could only wonder what that girl had even been talking about. When they returned, Rui turned toward them and Kyusuke called out to her, "Rui-senpai." Kurumi cheerfully apologized for the disturbance, while Kyusuke, still tense, awkwardly added that they had just been talking about how amazing Rui was. Rui calmly said that if that was all, then there should have been no reason to leave, but she also noticed Kyusuke's face and asked what had happened to his cheek. Kurumi quickly apologized again and claimed he had been trying to show off to her despite knowing Rui best. Kyusuke protested that he absolutely had not, and Rui asked if that was true. With a sly smile, Kurumi admitted that at first she had not been sure about a loser like him, but looking at them now, she had to admit that this slightly hopeless Kyusuke-san might actually be a good match for their flawless Rui-senpai, and from the outside, the two of them looked good together. Rui replied that she had never been worried to begin with, and Kurumi burst out in frustration that she guessed Kyusuke-san really was the kind of person Rui would choose after all, then promised that if he ever broke her heart, she would be there, while insisting that Rui-senpai had nothing to worry about. Kurumi forced out a bright farewell, saying she would head home now and wishing them all the happiness in the world as she waved with a smile. Rui casually told her to take care, and Kurumi answered that she would see them later as she started walking away, while Kyusuke and Rui watched her go. The moment she turned away, Kurumi completely broke down, crying heavily and sniffling as tears poured down her face. Then she suddenly dashed off at full speed, shouting that she hated this. Left behind, Kyusuke nervously wondered if he had done something wrong, but Rui calmly said she would be back to normal tomorrow. Rui then grabbed his hand, told him to come on and go home, and Kyusuke could only meekly agree as she pulled him along. Still unsettled, Kyusuke recalled Kurumi saying that Rui-senpai's ex showing up had caused quite a stir in the neighborhood. Rui noticed his expression and asked what she had meant, repeating the phrase, her ex, while Kyusuke looked back at her in uneasy confusion. Just then, a voice called out to Rui-san, and both of them turned to see someone waving nearby. The man addressed Kyusuke by name and asked if he was there shopping too, calling it quite a coincidence, while Rui looked puzzled that Kyusuke seemed to know him and asked if he was Itsuki. Rui suddenly realized they had not actually been introduced yet, and as she lightly patted Kyusuke, he stood there drenched in nervous sweat with a stiff, alarmed expression. Then, without hesitation, Rui introduced Kyusuke as her husband and introduced Itsuki as her ex-boyfriend, while standing calmly between the two men as Kyusuke froze beside her. The words hit both men like a blast, and Kyusuke and Itsuki alike stared in total shock, both breaking out in sweat as their faces twisted in disbelief. From above, the scene turned chaotic as Itsuki reeled back in shock and blurted out Kyusuke's name. Rui coolly noted that the two of them already knew each other, and Kyusuke looked so overwhelmed he had practically collapsed on the floor.